Believe in yourselves, chat. I muted myself.
Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to discuss issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we got a good one for you today. This debate series is the second in a two-part series sponsored by Rebellion PAC. Rebellion is a progressive PAC led by Brianna Wu, focused on communication and strategic alliances across the political divide. Rebellion believes that we can't solve problems without talking to each other about them, and we strongly support the mission of WIC TV. So here we are, gang. No one here has been paid to be here. No one's been paid to have a position. We're just going to be discussing contraception today. Is it good for our society? Should we legislate it or restrict it through the law and the force of the law? Why or why not? We'll get into it as we go. And I want to start by giving my guests here a brief introduction and a brief opening statement, and then we'll just get into the meat of it. We'll start with Bagels. Go ahead.
Awesome, thanks. I wrote out some opening comments, but the rest of it should be unscripted off the top. I want to thank WIC for organizing this discussion and giving me the opportunity to talk about this important and interesting topic. I want to thank Eucharist for recommending me to WIC, and I want to thank Vaush for taking the time to talk with me. I was initially hesitant to participate because I'm aware that my positions and arguments about this topic are unpopular. However, in the hope of good faith discussion about an interesting topic and with the advice and support of friends, I'm happy to be here. I should also mention that I'm Roman Catholic and as a result am part of the One Last traditions and communities who oppose contraception. That said, I would resist any preconceived judgments, first about my positions on any particular topic, including this one, and second, that my arguments about this topic are simply reducible to a position of irrational faith or contingent upon the demonstration of the existence of God. My positions on this topic are hopefully fundamentally rooted in the exercise of reason according to a virtue ethicist moral framework and a teleological ontology. Both orientations have served as traditions of thought for millennia without contingency upon the previous theological questions I mentioned. I would also say that I take exception to the title of this discussion insofar as I do not advocate for forced birth or anything of the kind. I understand that clickbait is how you get views on the internet, and I can certainly appreciate a meme. However, I do take discussions about topics like this seriously and genuinely want to find the truth, even if that entails admitting I've made a mistake or am wrong. As a last preliminary, I would also say that I'm incredibly conscious of the fact that this discussion, as far as I understand it, is between three men about a topic that has incredibly intimate impact upon women. I don't think that this means we cannot or should not discuss the topic, but I do think it's important to retain that fact in the back of one's head. There's a level of existential familiarity with contraception that I do not have that is likely extremely important to obtaining the best point of view on this topic in particular. As a result, I will try to restrict my comments to what I do know makes the most sense to me and am persuaded by. To state my argument succinctly, I hold that contraception is a particular application of vice against the virtue of charity, or chastity, and as a result is a violation of natural law, specifically as that has to do with human sexuality and its telos. Or in other words, contraception is contrary to what makes human sexuality intelligible, coherent, and good as the thing that it is. I would briefly begin by stating something fundamentally obvious. That is, human beings are the kind of animals who make moral judgments. Regardless of how we do so or the meaning that may or may not be behind our doing so, everyone makes judgments about what is good and bad. One of the most important ways we are able to arrive at such judgments is through understanding what the object of our analysis is. In so doing, we consider what the ideal or perfect instantiation of the object would be, and then its function and how well or poorly it attains to that perfection. Those qualities which we identify as useful and effective at drawing a thing in unity with its perfection, we identify as virtues or excellencies, in the Greek arete. This, in a nutshell, is the process of virtue ethics and teleology. We can apply such analysis to everything in reality, including sexuality. Thus, we can come to understand what sex is both in particular actuality and in abstract perfection. Then we can turn our minds to sussing out what constitutes what is good and bad with respect to sexuality. In so doing, we identify various qualities or virtues that serve as guideposts to our moral judgments about both particular and general cases.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. That was quite in depth, and I'm sure we will get into it in the meat of the discussion. Vaush, you're up.
Yeah, as I suspected, I don't think this conversation is going to be primarily about contraception. It's going to be about morality, chastity, birth rates, human sexuality, and romance. Ultimately, the problem is that when we design doctrines that we use to understand the world and guide our decision making, a lot of bias goes into the ways in which we construct those doctrines. For example, he talked about sex being an intelligible, coherent, and morally good component of human behavior. The problem is that these loaded terms have been used and misused in so many ways that when I hear it and when I understand what it means in practice, what I think it functionally is PhD philosophy speak for I think these things are good because I think these things are good. There is a virtue that I think is fundamentally good that should be referred to as a driving motivator for human behavior in society, which is freedom. I think people should have the freedom to make the choices that they want. The idea that the state should be used to restrict people's freedoms because of an abstract belief in the necessary coherence of human sexual activity ignores the fact that it has never been coherent. There has never been a point in time where humans lived in perfect accordance with natural law because natural law does not exist. If you go back far enough in human history, you will see behavior which is, by today's standards, certainly for a modern conservative, incoherent and degenerate. There is no point in time you could arrive at by which people would not be behaving by these standards. There's no ideal past. There's no platonic ideal of what we're meant to do when having sex or when engaging in relationships with other people. We have to make these judgments based on modern understandings of what is and isn't harm on an interpersonal level. And I think there's a great deal of harm in both an immediate and in a sort of a missed opportunity sense when we talk about the functional consequence of banning contraception which would be the end to casual sex and reproductive freedom for women. Those are real harms. They exist really and truly and functionally. They hurt people in material ways that can be quantified. Not so with this abstract notion of a coherent idea of sexuality.
Okay, and with that, I guess we will open up with my first question to both of you. Moment. Okay, NBC News has reported an avalanche of conservative influencers on social media who are promoting messages that are anti-birth control. These social media influencers include Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro, Steve Bannon, etc. Now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, is access to contraception the next legislative goal for these individuals to attack or block? And is that a good thing? I'll let you go first, Bagels. What do you think?
Yeah. So I would say from the outset that it's not necessarily my position that we should entirely ban contraceptives in the sense that nobody could ever use them or anything, or it's like it created some sort of black market or anything like that. I will say that because of the way in which contraceptives pervert, I would say, the concept of sexuality more broadly, we should limit and reimagine how we think about them. Because I think that contraceptives lead to a culture of contraception, which is opposition to life, or a culture of death. And that is fundamentally detrimental to human happiness more broadly. So I would be in favor of limitations of contraceptives.
What would those look like?
In terms of practical, I mean, not using them for basically any other purpose other than sort of medical necessity. So if there's some sort of harm that would otherwise unable to be prevented, then you would be able to use contraceptives, but otherwise just being able to have them for whatever reason at all, or even to do something like having sort of casual sex, as Vaush put it, I think is ultimately detrimental to what sex fundamentally is and what it's for.
Okay. Well, this is an open discussion, so go ahead, gang.
Oh, happily. See,
Discuss.
the Republicans are gunning for it. After the revocation of Roe v. Wade, Clarence Thomas wrote that the court should consider doing the same for Griswold versus Connecticut, which is the Supreme Court precedent that establishes a right to contraception. We do know for a fact that Republican politicians and pundits and lobbying groups are gearing up for it. The reason they're gearing up for it, of course, is because it's in line with a conservative agenda. It's a revocation of women's rights. A day of trad wives, of barefoot pregnant women who can't work a job. It's a social aim that they're gunning for. But I need to, Bagel, I need to ask. I mean, you say it perverts, that it's a death cult. This is silly. And you know this, right? Not wanting to produce a baby is not the same as death. There's nothing to die. There is no death. Nothing lived, so nothing can die. You might as well say that a society in which every woman is not pregnant at all times is a death society, because there are potential lives that could be made that are not being made. I mean, every masturbation session then is, well, you might believe that. Every masturbation session then would be a worship of death, because you're not creating life with the act. And this is silly. People have sex for a number of reasons, and a great deal of it, especially these days, is because it feels good. Why not let them feel good?
Yeah, so I would say to deal with the first thing or the last thing first, the why not just let them feel good. I don't believe that pleasure is some sort of ultimate criterion or has any sort of privileged status in relation to other considerations, and it needs to be weighed accordingly. And so the maximizing of pleasure, I would say, for a lot of reasons that go beyond the scope of this discussion, is not sort of the best way in which to live one's life. And again, there's a lot of arguments about that, but that's a separate discussion. Now, with respect to contraceptives specifically, the idea that we have adopted a technology which is a good thing in its sort of what I would regard its appropriate usage, which is sort of correcting, medical issues that particularly women encounter. Surrounding reproductive health, then in those uses it would be good. When it becomes an issue is when it's extrapolated out into this broad culture of people just having sex for no other reason, just to have sex or have pleasure.
Why not? Birth control exists to
Because
control birth.
Sure. So the idea that I mentioned in my previous opening statement was that each thing sort of has a purpose. It has, like, in order to make a determination about what is good or bad about it, both abstractly in general, but then also in a particular instantiation, one has to. This is just how we go about doing moral analysis.
Well, wait, no, it's not, because then somebody has to go about deciding the purpose, and that seems to me like a right arbitrary process.
No. So the way that we rationally approach determining whether something is good or bad, rather than just willfully saying, "Oh, this is good and I like this," but to have thought behind it, we have to have some sort of analysis, and there's a variety of different ways in which we do that. But what they all at least share is this idea that you have to understand what it is that you're talking about.
I disagree.
And
like, this is a hairbrush, right?
Yeah.
Or I use it for my beard. But if, I don't know, it got buried in the dirt and got found 1,000 years from now, petrified wood, and somebody thought that it was, I don't know, really good for clobbering people, the initial purpose of this item is irrelevant to the utility that it provides to those who use it. I mean, what is the purpose of an item? A water bottle holds water. Sure, it's marketed as a water bottle. If it held juice, would it become worthless? If it was used as a decorative piece, would it become useless? I don't understand this, because it's like the platonic ideal thing, but you get to decide the platonic ideal. Well, a thing is bad because it doesn't match up with your estimation of what it should be. But truth is, I mean, I don't care what you think sex should be. If it causes pleasure, and pleasure is happiness. I mean, they don't overlap perfectly, certainly, but people do get happy when they have sex,
Yeah.
generally speaking. If we're talking about stuff that makes people happier, that maximizes or at least improves human happiness, but it shouldn't be done because there's some abstract concept of what it should be and it doesn't match up with that. I mean, how does that fit? We could do that with anything.
Yeah, so I would push back on you saying that people just arbitrarily decide. Again, which sort of I maintained is the idea that when we're out living life, we observe things, and we come to just understand what they are at least are generally for. For the example of the hairbrush or the water bottle that you mentioned, yes, it can be used for other sorts of things, but what its sort of primary function or the reason it was created and designed was for holding, in the case of the water bottle, was holding liquid generally, is what you could say. And to say that it has to be water as opposed to juice or something else like that is just sort of semantics to a certain extent. It's trivial.
Who
But
cares what it was designed for?
that's how you determine what a thing is. So like when you're just sort of observing it. So basically all forms of sort of rational thought process, whether it's science to philosophy to literature, literally anything, whenever you're exercising your rational faculty, which everybody has, you're doing this, you're identifying things and establishing, at the very least, I mean, you're doing a whole lot of things, but at the very least what you are doing is identifying what a thing is, and then the question that is begged is what is it for.
But the uses of things change. In language, that's a terrible example. Language changes all the time. The words, the prepositions, the structure, the syntax we use today would have been unidentifiable 500 years ago. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with how we speak today. In fact, our language has only gotten more complicated, more intricate with time, but it's changed. If, again, like the moral good of something pertains to its like original use. If there was a tool that was built for a specific purpose, but then it gave people pleasure looking pretty on a mantle, would that be a moral wrong to derive pleasure from something which you believe is outside of the original purpose of an item?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it would depend on what it is. So uh, the only reason that I'm bringing up sexuality is because I don't think that you can talk about contraceptives as a technology apart from the broader context of sexuality in which it's couched. And so insofar as we can identify things and their usages, that's how we then go about making moral judgments about them. Now, this isn't to say that usages can't develop or they can't change over time, that sort of thing. And it's not really an argument against anything that I've said to say otherwise.
Well, the purpose of sex has changed.
Yes, and then you would change your evaluation based on that change in usage.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So,
sure.
so at the very least, we can then say, has sex fundamentally changed, and to such an extent that we need to redo our moral analysis? And I think the answer is pretty obviously, in terms of sexuality, no, it hasn't changed.
If I may interject,
Yeah,
because I'm trying to follow along. I'm enjoying the discussion so far. But a question for you, Bagels, and then a question for Bosch after. So,
sure.
Bagels, you mentioned that you do not think that sex or the purpose of sex has fundamentally changed in so much that you still think that contraception is antithetical to the purpose or what you view the purpose of sex is.
That's
So, again, right, and I want to drill down on this because I want to get from the conceptual to where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Given that this is your belief and this is what you think, what laws would you support specifically? Do you have any kind? I know it doesn't have to be a bill that's currently going through, but
Sure,
if you
yeah.
were to design a bill that would limit contraceptions, what would it look like?
Sure, yeah. So I will admit that this is outside of my area of expertise in terms of talking about specific policy. That's just not what I do. But as far as sort of broad strokes, I can give you that. The sort of law that I would look, as I mentioned before, would be just a limiting of usage, and then hopefully a cultural shift in how we think about sex and
Can
sexuality.
you elaborate? And I'm sorry for trying to pin you. I
Yeah,
know you're not an expert, and please
sure.
don't
Yeah,
feel like none of us are legislators here, right?
yeah,
But what kind of limitations would you like to see?
yeah. So having access, just essentially unlimited access to birth control would be significantly limited to some sort of expressed medical condition that without birth control you would not be able to deal with or
So you would need like a
overcome, that
doctor's
sort of
note,
thing.
right?
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Basically, some sort of medical certification as to why you would need a contraceptive.
Okay. To Vaush. So, even if sex or other things change over time, um, change is not always a good thing. Sometimes things can change for the worse. Is there any validity to someone who wants to fight against the changes that are happening when it comes to people engaging in certain activities in certain ways because they feel that it is doing harm? In other words, right? Maybe I can be more clear. Is there any change in how we view or act on sex that could happen that would cause you to want to limit that change or fight against that change with legislative power?
If people don't like changing social standards when it comes to fundamental elements of human behavior, they have to make an argument about harm. The problem that I have here is the argument being made is, well, I have an arbitrary and impossible to define standard of what this biological function that was not created is supposed to be, and therefore any deviation from it is like bad. Except, of course, deviations from everything that we've ever created on a social level or biological level happen all the time because things have never been that clean. Humans traditionally squat to shit. That's what we used to do. Now we have toilets. A perversion of our initial design, our biological function left unfulfilled thanks to this technological innovation. Now we pee in showers. Now we have glasses, pacemakers. Nothing in the world makes sense if you apply it to it within this standard. So would there be changes potentially that would cause, I don't know, concerns for me? Certainly. Here's a big one when it comes to the perversion of what I'd consider good behavior in sex: rape. Rape culture, or a tendency to ignore the consent of others, been around for a long time, mind you, doesn't mean we shouldn't get rid of it. If there are changes in how people approach or perceive sex that makes them more likely to ignore the consent of others, I think you can make a harm argument. But I wouldn't try to make some like platonic ideal argument, partially because people have been raping one another for a long time, and partially because I just don't think that's a good argument. That's not what's wrong with the problem with rape wouldn't be that it's new. The problem would be that it's bad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah, no,
So
please.
yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm making any sort of platonic ideal argument. Mostly, actually, who I'm drawing from would be Aristotle. But in any case, even there, it's not necessarily strictly Aristotelian rationality that I'm talking about. It's not like there's some idea of each thing sort of out there or wherever, in the ether, just you subsisting, and we sort of interact with them and all that sort of stuff. That would be Platonism, and I do have strong sympathies for it, but that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying on a much more fundamental, basic level, when we just go out into the world and observe things at a sort of very basic level, when we are making sort of rational judgments about them, we have to first understand what they are. And then that leads to questions. Okay, so we know what a thing is, what is it for? And that leads us to imagine what it sort of ideally could be.
But
And so
what something is for implies that there is a for to begin with. I don't believe that sex was made for anything. There are
so
plenty of vestigial elements of evolutionary reproductive processes that don't really have that much to do. For instance, kissing. Kissing doesn't have anything to do with making babies, but it's been an integrated part of human sexual and romantic behavior for all the history we're aware of. We just like
that's right.
doing it. What about oral or anal sex? Those go back for as long as we have any writings on the subject. We know people have been doing that for a long time. Both are incapable of producing children. Clearly, people have enjoyed sex without reproduction for as long as we are capable of tracking human history. I don't think there is some
Yeah.
origin point that can be referred to. Like there are a lot, like eating meat, right? Before we discovered fire, eating meat, right? You had to eat raw meat and contend with the parasites. That was just part of it. And then we learned
Yeah.
to cook meat. We changed the process. Has something fundamental been lost? Was the purpose of meat to be eaten with the parasites? Well, no, we just improved it. We used technology to improve the process.
Yes, yeah, no, and again, I wouldn't. Again, I haven't said that development doesn't happen or can't happen, or that it can't be even good. Um, the question is, has sexuality changed to the degree requisite that we would have to reevaluate sort of our moral judgments about it?
Has shitting
And
changed to the degree we'd have to reevaluate the moral necessity of us having to squat rather than sit in a toilet?
that wouldn't be sort of a moral issue
Why not?
to begin with, because there's no sort of integral part about how you actually poop.
Well, sure there is. It has to do with the relationship to your environment. Squatting to shit out in the woods is an expression of one's relationship to the natural environment. Now we do so on porcelain seats, like little tin gods. Is this not a corruption of like a God-given practice that we were expected to follow through on? I mean, toilets are a pretty new thing, especially flush toilets, right? How is this not like the original purpose of shitting was clearly to get up and close with nature?
Um, so no, I don't think that any sort of reasonable person would say that that was the original purpose of taking a dump. I think it's because you have the natural need to excrete waste from your body, and so it happens. Now, in terms of you know figuring out where you shit and you know the sort of logistical details of that, yes, you could ostensibly create some sort of moral quandary about that, but it's something that is sort of ridiculous on its face and not at all sort of analogous
Well,
to
I
what
think
we're
it
discussing.
sounds ridiculous to you because you have a bunch of like built up religious preconceptions about sex that I don't have. So to me, these sound identical. Sex and
Yeah.
shitting are both like natural human functions.
Well,
Ideally,
so
I'd
this
like to not wipe my ass with a leaf, right? But me not impregnating a girl while raw dogging her and me not having to use a leaf to wipe my ass are the same thing. It's just technology taking a biological process and improving it. It's just good to
sure.
me.
Yeah, yeah. The so the difference with so the way that they would be drawn together would be if there was some sort of um, moral quandary that was invoked with respect to just the necessity of having to excrete waste from one's body. And so, at the level of contraceptives and sexuality, what we're talking about is something that has a very distinctive purpose. It's also rooted in the conception of it being a significant act that people have. So without any sort of recourse to religion or God or anything, like I mentioned in my opening statement, the one can make considerations about this regardless of whether or not you believe in God or the spaghetti monster or whatever, you or nothing at all. There's still meaning in existence for human beings specifically.
Can I
And
can I ask,
I don't know
yeah,
what meaning.
please? So Bagels,
yeah,
you keep alluding to the meaning or a higher purpose that
yeah,
is separate from God, separate from your religion. Just
yeah,
is there? Can you be a little more clear for the audience what that is? Just
yes,
brief, concise, something we can latch onto.
yeah. Thank you. I should have been more clear about that. So I would say there's a twofold purpose to sex. One is the procreative, it's the continuation of the species, everything does it. And then second is in some form or other. And then the second would be the specific um, unity and companionship that is available to human beings in a way that's not to any other species.
Okay.
I don't care for something's purpose. A purpose is ascribed, but a function, that's something worthwhile. You know, in terms of creating something with a purpose, you can make a little wooden doodad or a tool or this, that, the other. It can have whatever purpose you like. But if a different function is found for it and it serves well in that function, this isn't a moral problem. You can make the argument that sex, well, but you
It
can make
absolutely is.
conditional arguments.
So,
You could, well, I
so
just want to say,
let's take.
you could say
Okay.
if there was a tool that functioned
Mhm.
unacceptably as a screwdriver, which was intended to be, but excellently
Yeah.
as a hammer, and you just
Yeah.
used it as a hammer, there's nothing moral wrong in its use of as a hammer. That's the function that it's fulfilling well. Likewise,
That's
you could argue sex with contraception, terrible at making babies, as it turns out. It fails in that function, but there are other functions in which it succeeds.
Okay. So for the first thing, with respect to the screwdriver that functions better as a hammer, at that point we would then, at least practically speaking, consider it to be a hammer and judge it. That is, make moral judgments about it or qualitative judgments about it based on how good of a hammer it is. And so we've totally jettisoned the standards of screwdrivers
Unless it takes a new
away
purpose.
from the instrument. That's right, and then it would change based on that. So another sort of example to bring up the one that you brought previously. So you use your hairbrush to comb your beard earlier, but let's say people started using hairbrushes as like knives to kill people, and that became just a widespread thing, and everybody was doing it, and it just became ingrained in what we sort of understood what a hairbrush is, in the same way that we're talking about for all these different things. Then at that point, the standards of judgment regarding hairbrush would fundamentally change to accommodate the new function that it ostensibly took on. And my argument is that sex has not changed in such a way, to that degree, where that we need to create new moral categories. In response to the second half of what you just said, yes, contraceptives make it, hopefully, the intent is to make it impossible to reproduce, to conceive a child. But then you concluded by saying that, but it does a lot of other things really, really well. And so the first thing that I would say is, what does it do really, really well? And so, if with respect to certain medical conditions that women face, that we only have contraceptives to sort of combat and heal at this point, then that usage would be good. And as I said before, I'm totally for having those sort of limited usages. However, we then say, okay, what else does it do that's good, that I would find objectionable? And I sort of assume that you would say, well, it makes sex really, really good, right? Because you can have just casual sex any sort of time without any sort of thing. And this would be analogous to my second purpose of what I understand sex and sexuality to be, which is that unitive purpose, and like companionship between spouses. The way that then the question becomes, well, is that benefit unique to contraceptives? And the answer is no.
Well, hold on here.
Without contraceptives, you can have just as good sex as with contraceptives, and you can
No.
experience your sexuality to its fullness
This is
just as without contraceptives.
it's like a fish that doesn't know what water is, right? You're so caught up in your
Yep.
biases, you've already conceded the point. If a tool can be considered to have a different purpose once its utility in a different regard is found, you must acknowledge that for the vast majority of people, most of the times they have sex, the purpose of that sex is for mutual pleasure, not to produce a child. If you make the argument that a screwdriver which functions better as a hammer has its purpose reassessed to that function and is judged by that function, then listen, there are lots of people for whom sex is a pleasure game. That's why contraceptions exist, right? Or contraceptives exist. That's why it matters so much to people that they can do this. And it has to be judged by a different purpose. Nobody judges casual sex by the fertility of the participants. That's contradictory. You don't go into casual sex, or in fact, most sexual encounters thinking, I hope this produces a child. In fact, I would go so far as to argue that that's almost certainly the case for all of human history. People don't just wait to have sex to have a baby. People know that having sex produces a baby, but usually people have sex when they're horny and around someone that they're attracted to. The interest in having sex, the desire to fulfill, is our sex drive, not our reproductive intent in most cases, more so today than before even. So I would argue that even by your logic, we must acknowledge that sex has multiple purposes depending on what it's good for. And if it's good for pleasure, social attainment, whatever, if that's something it's functioning well in, then that's the purpose it should be judged by, which contraceptives facilitate, or anal or oral sex, homosexual sex in many cases. You know, there are a great many things you can do that not produce a kid. And if you're looking to have a kid, if that's the intended purpose, then stay off contraceptives, do vaginal, do cream pies. But that's clearly a different thing. That's why couples will say stuff like, we're trying for a baby. What, you mean you weren't fucking before then? You've been together 5 years, now you start? Well, no, what they mean is they're doing a different thing now. It's not just sex. They're trying for a kid.
Okay, I'm going to let you respond, Bagel, but after your response, I do have a question for Vaush. So
Cool.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, so I'll try to be brief then. So I would just reiterate the uniqueness point, particularly I'm speaking specifically in terms of sex between a man and a woman. The contraceptives doesn't provide a benefit in terms of sexuality in its fullest expression and fulfillment that would not be obtainable by sex without contraceptives. It's not like a married couple who don't use contraceptives can't achieve the same sort of sexual fulfillment or whatever, pleasure, etc., as a couple who do use contraceptives.
I think not getting locked into an 18-year fulfillment is probably a pretty big part of the fun.
Well, just because you have sex doesn't mean you're necessarily going to conceive a child. Either way, the point is that in the act itself, without necessarily considering the sort of effects of it, which would be sort of an extension of the question, it's non-unique. The second thing that I was going to say, is just there. Go ahead and ask your question, Wick.
Yes, give it a minute, and maybe I'll come back to you. So, Vaush, you've mentioned many times in this debate that many people simply want the act of pleasure. They use sex as a pleasure tool to get pleasure. Do you see that there are any potential downsides to this? And because contraception takes away some of the risk, it can be argued by some that this would facilitate and encourage and incentivize further promiscuity. Do you see any downside at all to that? Would that be something that would cause any concern at all? Why or why not?
Well, no, I don't have an issue with promiscuity. The problem is these arguments have been made before to control women's autonomy or people's general social autonomy, but it's always just an imposition on their freedom to adhere to arbitrary social biases. You know, the idea that women shouldn't speak to other men besides their husband. Well, you could argue fairly that allowing women to speak to other men increases promiscuity. And you know what? It does. Yes. Allowing your wife to speak to other men does, in fact, increase the likelihood of, or like speak to other men when they're like not even married yet or whatever. Yes, that does. It does correspond to that. So what? That's freedom. And this is a freedom that men have.
Some men, some it decreases. I mean, talking to some men is like, okay.
So but it's like these standards are so arbitrary, okay? Now, I'm not advocating for stuff like dishonesty, like cheating, for example. I don't think people should be unfaithful in committed relationships. I think that's horrible. I'm not advocating for, say, people to engage in social relations that don't benefit them. Here's an example of a social relation that is not on the ground for attack on this contraceptive line, but is still potentially damaging, okay? What about going out and like partying too much? That's the thing that a lot of people do, and it ends up getting them in bad situations. But we're not making the argument then that like, oh, okay, well, much in the same way that contraception allows for irresponsible reproductive choices, now going out and like socializing too much, that's also something we have to crack down on. We could strip away right after right after right in the effort to get people to behave ideally, but that's just not what America, what human life broadly is about. We have to give people the freedom to make their own choices and construct good social incentives to help them make the right ones.
Any response to that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's great that Vaush brought up autonomy because that is an important topic, especially today. Lots of people are interested in it. I would say first of all that where that comes from is Immanuel Kant. He's the sort of first guy who really develops a robust account of human autonomy on a sort of philosophical level. And it has certainly dictated the way that we talk about autonomy today, particularly in Western countries. But even for him, one's autonomy was limited by what he identified as the sort of the natural laws, that is, those moral judgments that one is able to sort of rationally arrive at through just simple living in the world and observation of the phenomena and things that are in the world.
Like what?
Like what?
What freedom should be curtailed an account for these natural laws?
Yes. So freedoms where it hurts other individuals, for instance. That was a huge deal for Kant. And then you have J.S. Mill, who's talking about the no harm principle, and he develops that as well. And so there's certainly limitations.
Can you give us an
to
example?
autonomy.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
give us can you give us, because it's easier to
Sure.
grasp and to crunch, an example where you say, because you mentioned a freedom that harms other individuals. What is a freedom in your mind that has a potential or does harm other individuals? And we can talk about that.
Yeah, so for instance, you don't have absolute autonomy in the sense that you can't just do whatever you want. Is basically what I mean. You don't have absolute sort of independence from everybody else. You're reliant, at least in some small part, on other people. So
the harm is
the
my
first
standard, ain't it? As I was the one who said, if you're going to make these judgments to restrict freedoms, you have to do it based on a harm principle. But you said that pleasure, happiness, aren't the standards by which you judge whether or not these actions are moral. So you're the one who's looking to move away from a harm standard. But I'm okay with that standard. I just don't think anyone's harmed by having casual sex.
Yeah, so I'm happy to get to that. That's a little bit different from the question that Wick asked me. So let me just give a quick example then, really quickly. So, like, for instance, if somebody owns, so first of all, I would say in the case of children, we see the limitation of personal autonomy most clearly. Children are unable to exist in the world apart from a caretaker of some sort or another. Usually it's a parent, but it doesn't always have to be, but they're dependent. That is to say, their autonomy is substantially limited. Even as adults, we still have sort of intense limitations in terms of our autonomy. We need other people in order to do the things that we do. Specifically, though, in terms of violating somebody's autonomy, would be if you were to just somebody had a piece of property and you wanted to hold a protest or something like that, or a demonstration, or do something on their property. You don't have the autonomy to just go ahead and do whatever you want on their property. You have to first seek permission and all this other stuff. And so this is the basis of the, or this is the sort of rooted in this idea of J.S. Mill's do no harm, but it's also rooted in Kant's sort of categorical imperative.
I guess I'll ask directly,
Yeah.
right? Do you think that casual sex causes harm? And in what ways?
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. Yes, so casual sex causes harm insofar as it. So again, when we can identify a thing as what it is, and then sort of secondarily as what it's for, we can then determine what is good or bad about it, sort of abstractly, but then also in particular. And so the idea that you can have casual sex, that is sex without any sort of connection to its fundamental purpose of procreation and sort of a union between two people, means then, and a significant union, not just something that's sort of trivial, but something that's significant, that is an expression of love or, commitment or whatever else. All the things that we have historically and still to this day take sex to mean. Whenever those things are lost, that contributes to getting away from the purpose of sex, which inevitably
You're missing
does.
the harm standard. You're doing the purpose thing again.
No, because and so this is where there's a connection, right? So when we identify what a thing is for, the virtues tell us how good or bad they are at attaining to that
But
perfection.
I don't respect your
And so,
definition of what sex is for. Like I think that your definition of what sex is for is highly emotionally charged. It might as well come right out of scripture. If you're having casual sex, the purpose of
no,
that sex might just be to get your nut off. That's the purpose. That's the purpose that I imbue into the action. Much in the same way that a walk can
yes,
have the
but
purpose of a brief jaunt about town or a long hike. It's my decision.
I mean, that's certainly trivial and shallow, though, right? Because it's plainly not the case that
No,
you determine.
Plainly not. See, you're doing it again. You keep referring to matters of intuition. No, it's not plainly not. Any action,
It's not a matter of intuition.
any
It's a matter of
social
rational
bond,
observation
like
and
a
analysis.
hug with somebody, can have
Yeah.
many meanings and purposes depending on what you're trying to do. We were talking about a harm standard, but we've gone back now to this. Well, I think that sex is supposed to be about this. Well, I don't. I don't think that at all.
Right.
In
So,
fact, and you didn't really have a response for the fact that I think by a fair estimation, the majority of sexual acts committed between humans, not just a majority, I mean the vast majority, were not purposefully to bring about children.
So I would push back on that, but to get to the first thing about the harm. So what I'm trying to say is that the virtues and the perfection are what define what is harmful or beneficial, right? So the whole point is that by being virtuous, by attaining to a perfection as it's been identified, not through the expression of will, but through the observation of the thing and the and sort of rational analysis of what that thing is, one is able. There's happiness or goodness is achieved.
But
for human beings, it's happiness. For the thing itself, it's goodness.
People enjoy. No. People enjoy casual sex. It's the purpose that they imbue into the sex they're having. If a person wants to spend time with somebody with the intent of making it a friendship or a romantic partnership, sex to make it simply pleasurable or to bring about children, you don't have the authority to decide for them what the purpose of their actions are. You can talk about, biologically, the purpose of our sexual organs is to reproduce, and that's true. I agree with that. But there are plenty of things about our bodies that are supposed to this and that we don't respect at all. I'm wearing glasses. You're hearing things through an ear set. Like you could run that back infinitely. We're not anarcho-primitivists here. If you want to make a moral argument for what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to be, well, you're going to have 1,000 people in the room and 2,000 different interpretations of any given event. It's not even consistent within Catholic scripture, right? There are plenty of arguments even within religious groups as to the acceptable, tolerant bounds of what should or should not be a relationship. This is why there are so many ideological gulfs between Western religious people and Islam, because many Islamic countries think what you're saying, except about all male-female interactions. That's why they have their women wear burqas in Saudi Arabia, because they think the purpose of eye contact between a man and a woman is to instill that bond, that love, that shouldn't be tainted or made frivolous by allowing women to look openly at men. And that's the same logic you're using. I think your argument that sex is purposefully X is the same as their argument that eye contact between a man and a woman is purposefully Y. And I reject both, of course. I just want to see people be happy. And I respect the harm standard, but apart from that, I just don't care for the purpose.
Okay. I want to get us back kind of, again, we keep going into this heady space, right? I want to try to bring, fair enough, try to bring us back to kind of like the grounded, what this means for people if these standards either get applied or do not get applied. And a question for you, Vaush, if I may, right? Do you think that this push, legislatively that some have been supporting on the right of us. Do you think that this is perhaps a proxy battle for something else? That they are using this as kind of like a thin end of the wedge, or do you think that this is their goal, just their straight up goal?
I actually don't think it's a wedge because contraception is so popular that there's no adjacent goal that you could be working towards through that. It's like the path of most resistance. Like it's something like 90% of Americans or more support contraception. So there's no other position you could arrive at. They would get more voters like arguing a flat earth theory than they would arguing to completely revoke contraception. I think it's an end goal for them. I just think that the whole like females barefoot and pregnant thing is kind of the end state of social conservatism because it's so heavily rooted in male sexual insecurity. I think a lot of people just like respectfully to Bagel, who I genuinely think is a really smart guy, by the way. I appreciate talking with you. But in my experience, talking with a lot of conservatives online, like the impression that I get is that, especially with the anti-contraception stuff, a lot of them are just like kind of terrified of black guys coming in and taking all the white women. There's a lot of like immigration fear, a lot of race mixing fear. And then there's this like, okay, well, the real problem is women's lib because women's liberation allowed them to do the hypergamy thing, right? It's the red pill ideology. Like, well, now they can sleep around and find the high T alpha men or whatever. So the only way to keep them from doing that is to reel it all in by denying them the ability to even engage in casual sex. So I think like it is a goal, like it's an end state, but like, man, it's like a rocky road to get there for a lot of them, you know?
In that case, a follow-up question: does it concern you at all that many Republicans feel confident enough about bringing this up that you think that does it concern you that they think they have any chance of winning, or do you think that this is just a Hail Mary kind of play? That this is just a virtue signal to their base? They're not serious about it, etc.
It concerns me, but I don't think they can win on this issue. I think they can
Fair
win
enough.
on other adjacent issues, especially considering like women's liberation. I think they might be able to get like the right to contraception overturned, but like broadly, that's a really tough nut to crack.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also have some thoughts about this. Like I largely agree with Vaush's analysis that there's particularly from sort of these sort of Republican, very sort of in the public sphere political types. There are just there are a lot of these sort of insecurities. I do think though that there are from the right people who genuinely believe it, and I would also say that I would find myself as one of them, and I think most good Catholics would as well. Where it's not some sort of virtue signaling. It's not some sort of um, political thing where they're just trying to get power over people and tell people what to do. But it's because they genuinely believe that there's right and wrong standards, sort of how I've been attempting to outline, and that this falls in contradiction with sort of the telos of what sexuality is.
And on that note, Bagel, if I may
Yeah.
ask you, right? So when we look at contraception and what it has done for women's liberation, as Vaush
Yeah.
mentioned, right? Does it concern you, or does it worry you at all that if your goals got accomplished, that this might have the unintended, perhaps, side effect of setting back women's liberation? Does that
Yeah.
concern you, and what kind of guardrails in any policy you would put
Yeah.
would try to curtail that from happening?
No, this is a great question. This is where sort of I was trying to head, and then you asked me this. But so ultimately, my goal is a sort of reevaluation of human sexuality itself. It's not, and I think this is what sort of Catholic teaching in general is about. At the best of times, it can get perverted or twisted in sort of popular American political discussion, which is very sort of dogmatic and ideological and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it's not. It's absolutely a concern that, and it is a good concern that women should not be sort of discriminated against in the way that sort of they traditionally have throughout history, and it's a bad thing that they have done so. So the argument against contraception, I don't think, at least in spirit, is intended to be some sort of means by which we control
I
women.
understand that it's not intended, but you understand how intentional or not, it may likely have these consequences. Again,
Right.
why is
So
the
this is
policy?
why I wouldn't advocate contraceptive legislation in a vacuum, right? So the way in which you go about sort of accomplishing the goals that I actually want to achieve would not be simply telling women that they no longer have access to contraceptives unless they can get a doctor's note for some sort of medical condition that they need it for. But is instead to have both men and implement laws for both and legislation and sort of cultural norms, not even necessarily laws, right? Because I agree with Vaush as well when he said in his opening statement that we shouldn't be just going to the government for needless reasons and just asking for regulation. We should have a criterion of freedom. But the point is, we should implement sort of social standards, moral or mores, as well as legislative goals of recapturing what sex is and what it's for, so that casual sex is not something that either men or women are just having,
Why
freely.
not? It's good. It feels good. I feel like I want to know the root of like the purposeful harm here. Okay. So I go out to a bar and I meet a cute girl and we get flirty, we go to her place. Okay. So abortion's illegal, contraception's not available. All right? I'm a fertile young man. I got to be careful. So do you think it would be morally superior for me to just like do anal with her? Would that as opposed to contraceptive vaginal sex? So anal's not superior. Why not? Because there's no purpose to reproduction for anal sex.
Yeah. So ultimately, and on a technical level, both. So contraceptives is so. Historically, contraception and the arguments against it have been conflated with arguments against eugenics and abortion and stuff like that. And technically speaking, that's not right. So the arguments against contraception is not that it prevents the life of someone or kills someone or anything else like that, unless it's abortive fashion. And in that case, then yes, it would be part of the sort of abortion debate. But like contraceptives, like the pill or an IUD or things like that, the reason why these are problematic is because they're what is called natural vices. And in the same way, contraceptive is a natural vice with respect to
Anal
especially
sex a natural vice?
Yes, and so that's where I'm going. So anal sex, but then also oral sex, masturbation, all these sorts of things.
Where?
So the virtue would be, or the virtue in question is chastity, but then overall it's human sexuality per se.
How is chastity a virtue?
Because it according to chastity, one is best able to attain to the perfection that is sex, according to the two ends of procreation.
I don't believe unity. It. Where is that from? What study could I refer to determine that?
There are certainly papers, academic papers, but
religious papers, I imagine, on the virtues of chastity.
No. Philosophical papers and sometimes there's Christians who are talking about it. Sometimes it's not Christians. Like, for instance, Aristotle believed in the virtue of chastity.
I don't care what he believed.
And he wasn't a Christian. Okay, but the point is, you're asking for studies from somebody else.
But this is
I'm
just
the thing.
Giving a philosophy,
very easy example.
So philosophy, as I understand it, guides my interpretation of the facts of the world. Like the facts of the world are as they are, but I'm not being given a fact of the world here. You're asking Aristotle to supply it, that it's a virtue.
No.
Well, in what way?
Right. So just to refer back to sort of my opening comments, there I was basically very, very, very briefly describing virtue ethics and teleological ontology.
Yeah, I don't believe in those either.
Yeah, okay. It's right. So you'd have to provide me with reasons why you don't believe in those. Like just saying it is
I'm a
okay. Who
utilitarian.
cares? Like how are we supposed to have a discussion?
Well, no, but
okay,
again, the problem is, the problem is here. Like, notice how
Yeah.
my utilitarianism hasn't really been relevant to the discussion.
Yeah,
Because the harm standard for assessing whether something is good or bad is like a broadly accepted, observationally valid way of determining whether or not we should invest energy in preventing something. But you have to keep referring back to like abstract, unfalsifiable concepts of virtue or what is intended or what is purposeful to make statements about the world. Whereas my philosophy, my framework guides my understanding of the world. Yours tells you what the world is. You're seeing harm where, as I understand it, it doesn't exist because you're told, well, that's harmful. I don't know how you could look at casual sex and see harm. I don't think chastity is a virtue. I think moderation is a virtue, but I think that life is complicated enough that people have to be expected to make their own choices. So is gluttony bad? Well, in the biblical sense, like overeating at every meal, sure, you'll get sick that way, fine. But is eating heavily on Thanksgiving morally wrong? Is it gluttonous to enjoy a single great meal? Well, no to you, because in your head, you're thinking, Thanksgiving's fine. But in my head, I think that casual sex is fine. So we don't have a shared ground to make any assessment here. If we're talking about like harm, do you feel a bit like, do you have a tummy ache after Thanksgiving? Sure, maybe. And maybe do people feel a little bit sad after casual sex sometimes? Sure. Okay. And then should we never have a big meal for our tummies might ache? No, we have to be personally responsible.
No, I get you, and I hear you. So the thing that I would say to that is that up to this point, we had sort of been, there had not been any sort of direct challenge to sort of my sort of virtue ethicist orientation. But insofar as you are a utilitarian, my position is that there are specific instances, and I think sex is one of those, where we need some sort of evaluative standard that is supra-utilitarian. That is to say, utility cannot tell us everything that we actually need to know in order to make a moral judgment about sex and sexuality, and therefore can't tell us whether or not contraception and contraceptive technologies are good or bad.
Why?
Because
Why
it's
is that
super
so
utilitarian, right? So there's draw a contrast between two different types of virtue. So you have virtues like honesty about property or sobriety. Those are all sort of fundamentally utilitarian in character. The whole point of them is just the obvious material well-ordering of human life that you have if people have those virtues.
I don't believe in virtues. I believe in axioms, to be clear. I think it's okay to lie to the Nazis about having Jews in the basement. You know, I don't arrange my thoughts.
So just humor me for a second. So the general respect for example, the general respect for prohibition on murder makes life more commodious. It makes it better. But if people really respect the prohibition against murder, life is more pleasant for everyone. But this argument is comic, because utility presupposes the life of those who are to be foremost to the victim, whose life is not inconvenienced. It just isn't there anymore. He isn't there to complain. So the utilitarian argument has to be on behalf of everyone else. Though true, it is highly comic and is not the foundation. The objection to murder specifically is super utilitarian. And so in this way, it's different from something like honesty about property or sobriety.
I don't agree at all. I think you can factor that into your calculations.
Right. So the reason why, but okay, do you understand the logic of what I just said?
I do understand it, but I disagree. I don't think there's an objective ordering of moral priorities. I'm a meta-ethical nihilist.
So I don't think you do understand it, because that's not what I said. So
you're
so
arguing that the instance of murder would require supra-utilitarian consideration because it's not possible to factor in the moral weight of a death because they no longer can consider their own position.
That's right.
Which I understand. I disagree with it because I don't think there's an objective order.
So you do understand it because you just restated it. So why do you disagree with that? Because just saying you disagree with it is not a disagreement. That's just you saying you disagree with it.
Well, I have to disagree with supra-utilitarian consideration because I don't believe in anything outside of it. I don't think there's an objective moral standard.
That?
Just real quick, stop.
That's not what I'm saying.
One at a time.
Okay. But I'm also not saying.
And then you
no, it's fine. He can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. don't mean to be too combative, but
Okay.
I will say I do want to press you on this because it's not that I'm saying there's an objective moral standard or anything else like that. I'm saying according to the logic of the argument I just outlined, that the reason why murder is wrong is not because it's something that the person who is murdered can consider and perceive to be unuseful, but it's because it's incumbent upon the rest of us to analyze and make a evaluative judgment
But I
about
do think the murdered person's perspective factors in.
how you just agreed that the person is not there to have a perspective
Because
anymore.
you've stolen it. You've taken it from them. You took something
Right.
that was theirs. It's a bodily autonomy argument.
Right. And is that their evaluation, or is it yours? Is it everybody else's who's not murdered?
It's always my evaluation. I don't really care for theirs. When I make ethical considerations, you can't really factor in the individual weighted preference of everyone who you're adding to your consideration, right? You have to make a
Right.
general statement. I don't think there's a way to objectively assess the, like, well, this is 1 point of harm and this is 3, a murder is 5. I don't think there's a way to objectively arrive at those standards, but I think you can make fair and reasonable considerations about the way in which somebody's life being taken away might weigh against other things. For the most part, these considerations don't come up that much, except for like trolley problem examples, I guess, which are a fun philosophical problem to banty about, but they're unsolvable for a reason, right? Philosophy doesn't solve all of these problems. They give us the tools to understand the problems.
Yeah. So, I mean,
And after you respond, I have a question for you that might drive this forward. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't really have much of a response other than to say that what was just said doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because and I have no idea why you invoked the trolley problem. And ironically enough, it was developed by a virtue ethicist to demonstrate the point that utilitarian and consequentialist methods of moral reasoning are sort of inadequate to actually fully assess a moral situation.
I disagree. I think you hit the one person instead of the 5. I think it's a pretty solvable problem, actually, in the cases that are usually
but
that's you Kantians, huh? That's you guys. But you're still killing someone. Yeah, you caused less people to be killed. Again, the complexities are in the edge cases. For the most part, what is right, what is good, I think it's an easy answer. The question, the hard stuff is, how do you get there? And I think that casual sex is a good, it makes people feel good. It makes people happy. No harm is done. I mean, harm could be done, but harm could be done in any social interaction. Fundamentally, casual sex doesn't cause harm. And given that, I think it's a fine thing to promote. I don't think it promotes broader social harm. I think the opposite is true.
So I'm making the point that we have to we do have to consider the consequences of casual sex. We also have to consider the utility of casual sex, but there's also more to be considered. That is the sort of standards of what sex actually is.
But no. It is what it is. It is a thing that feels good. Sometimes it leads to kids, sometimes it doesn't. The fact that you are arguing that it's a moral wrong to do anal sex is indicative of the fact that this is all religious gobbledygook. This isn't about like the perceived worth or use or whatever of an act. All human behaviors are multifaceted and have the ability to mean different things with different intentions in any case. This is society and social interactions are too complicated to factor in this way. And this standard you have, it's morally wrong because it doesn't fit in with my arbitrarily determined preconception of what it should be, would not hold to any other standard that we engage in. Not to shitting, not to hugs, not to kissing, not to eye contact with the Saudis, which you didn't respond to, by the way. This arbitrary standard is always invoked as a metric of control. So and all I hear here is control. But you offer control, but in a conciliatory way, I feel bad for the loss of women's rights, but still I think that women should just risk pregnancy in all acts of sex and not be able to meaningfully develop careers because they get pregnant and married at 19, the way it was for thousands of years if people weren't having oral and anal sex, which of course they have been. And it's I don't think you're lying to me at all, but it's like, why this arbitrary standard?
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't say it's arbitrary. I also have repeatedly said that without reverting to any sort of theological claim, that we human beings in the process of just observing and living in the world, do this when they're making moral
I observe the world.
evaluations.
I think people
Whether
have sex
or
to
not
have
they
fun.
believe in the existence of God, whether they believe in the existence of the spaghetti monster, whether they believe in the existence of Zeus, whether they believe in or they say that God doesn't exist at all and it's just nothingness. No matter what, they all sort of observe things, and in order to determine whether or not they consider them to be good or bad, at least on a rational level rather than just a mere willful or repetitive level, they have to first understand what that thing is that they're observing.
Okay.
And
Do you
that's
think,
the basis.
just one question. Do you think that like it should be immoral to hold hands with somebody that you're not in a romantic relationship with? Because through observation of the world, almost everyone on Earth would agree, I guess not on Earth, there are different cultures, but at least in America would agree that holding hands with somebody walking down the street is like a pretty strong indication of like shared intimacy or romantic affection. Do you think
Yeah.
that like it cheapens that and it's a rejection of like intended human behavior to hold
Yeah,
hands
and
with a bro?
so yeah, no, I think this is where nuance. I absolutely agree with you that, sort of cultural conditions certainly change the evaluation of this, right? Because in some cultures, it's just totally every day. There's no sort of romantic affiliation with holding someone's hand. But in sort of our culture, it has been established as some sort of romantic expression.
But in our culture, casual
It's
sex is the norm.
there's a difference, but exactly, but that's the problem, right? Because I think casual sex is fundamentally
No, you
antithetical
keep doing it.
to.
You keep going like, okay, so culture, a change in function can mean a change in purpose. Cultural differences can mean that a different, like
Yes.
human social behavior has a different
But
thing.
you're not
then
you're
with
not
sex,
engaging
you're
with the
like,
point.
no.
You're not engaging with the point that I repeatedly made, that I don't think, and you have yet to demonstrate how and in what substantive, especially ontological ways, sex has changed
No,
from
I reject the premise. I'm not
even
even
100 years ago.
No, I reject the premise because you haven't engaged with it on
Okay,
the
but
subject of kissing, shitting, and hand-holding.
now that's just a way to avoid the question.
No, it's
right?
not. No,
You're
because
you're
you
saying
are not
it's not this way, but
no,
then also I'd reject.
Okay,
you
one
are
at a time, one at a time.
wait. The problem is you're not respecting that standard for anything else we talk about. We're not talking about
No,
how
I am.
No, we're not. Because with hand holding for over a century in America and way beyond that previously, it's associated with romance. When it comes to casual sex, for all of human history, humans have been having casual sex. The Egyptians made condoms out of like crocodile intestines. Your standard for, well, can you show me how it's substantively changed? Humans have always had casual sex. Now we can bust in pussies too. And that the meaningful standard there in this case is a 50% increase in hole saturation without risk of pregnancy. If that is a substantial enough difference that it means you have to like, I reject the idea that you even have to assess the quote intended purpose of a social behavior in order to determine the moral worth of deviating from said purpose, because that's not how we work. And it's also not how you interpret any other social behavior. Again, Saudi eye contact, hand holding, all of this stuff. We look at it and we make assessments based on real world observations of harm. The Saudi shit is bad because women shouldn't have to wear burqas their entire life. You should be able to hold hands with whoever you want, even if people will assume it's your romantic partner. And if with sex you want to have a baby, just don't take the pill.
I gotcha. So with respect to the hand holding and the eye contact, I should address that. I certainly sort of addressed it in my head, but then either it was interrupted because I brought up casual sex and then you jumped in and were sort of repulsed by that. But in any case, the point is that
I'm not repulsed by it. I just think you're not. It's like a fake standard.
You're repulsed. Well, you're repulsed by, or it seems like you're indignant towards my position.
But I pointed out how it's inconsistent.
And you jumped in. Yeah. Okay. This is where, because I haven't had the chance to address it properly, which is my fault. So to address the holding hands thing, I think you're right insofar as culture creates mores or standards of sociability and stuff, and it is sort of how we morally evaluate each other, is how well or badly people sort of attain to those sort of cultural standards. And so insofar as you are habitually holding hands with somebody who, you're not in a romantic relationship with and all this other stuff, and you are fully cognizant of sort of the standards that the culture you're in has, like these pretty significant assignations of meaning to that action, then it would be problematic. There's a scale, though, of like
You
harm.
think it's morally wrong?
I think even you would. I think even you would. So no, I don't know. I don't know if I would go so far as to say morally wrong, just because of the scale of it. Right? It's the scale of it contextually matters, and you can't. Interestingly enough, according to both a utilitarian and a consequentialist framework, you can never take into account the scale of an action, right? Because you aren't considering the action itself. You're either considering the utility that that action brings, or you're considering the consequences of the action. But the action itself remains unexamined, and this is why virtue ethics is necessary, because you can then
I don't believe in virtue
investigate. Ethics. Yeah.
Okay,
I can tell.
I understand we're kind of circling the drain on this. And
Sorry.
I want to get no, it's fine.
I just want to know what
Good
harm
discussion.
there is in casual sex, because you alluded to scale of harm there, but
So
I keep asking about harm, and then it keeps going to, well, I say that sex has this purpose and it's immoral to not do that purpose. Which
so I don't say that sex has this purpose. I think that has been established through, thousands or millions or however many years humans have existed and have been having sex.
have you done polls on people from like
people
have society?
Have determined two things. One is for reproduction, and two, it's for a sort of almost at least significant, but I would say for most people it's a mystical
too.
It's a mystical union between two souls.
No, it feels people because it feels good. Romance can be a part of it, but the idea that historically sex has been a magical Disney bond between people is absolutely not true.
You've never had sex. You've never had head so good it sent you to the mystical plane.
Not from every person who gave me head. No, that's like a selective thing. I have standards for that.
There is significant. I'm sorry. It's not. I don't want to be conflated or drawn into this idea of like this sarcastic magical plane of existence or anything. But there is significance and weight and meaning to sex that everyone has acknowledged throughout history, as long as people have been having sex. And that's you even agree with that. I know you agree with that.
Fundamental problems with your argument. Okay, one, it's inconsistently applied. There are every element of human society and what we do has been shaped enormously over time, and people do different things for different reasons. But there's no moral outrage about that, not necessarily at least. Two, people have been having casual sex for all of human history, and we know this for an undeniable fact. The idea that, like, for ages, humans thought it was a sacred bond, and then only since 1961 or whatever that has changed, that's not true.
Yeah.
And for three, and critically here, the idea that something is immoral because it deviates from the assumed purpose of an action based on some, like, historical hegemony is ridiculous. We don't look to the popularity of a behavior or action in order to determine whether it's moral. Like humans, that is like a regressive to a point of like epistemic failure. Because if you applied that standard to everything, it would be like, oh, well, we finally settled on a set of human behaviors that meet with the like hegemonic standard, and we're all like apes in the woods, That's just not a standard we apply to anything.
So, I mean, you're attributing to me a lot of things that I haven't said, and maybe that's just my lack of communication.
It's not a lack of communication. These are the things that you believe. I'm just telling you the things that you believe. You have referred to millions of years.
I haven't said any of those things. And
no, wait, hold on. Did you not say?
I don't believe
No. I can't let you run.
Yeah.
Did you not say that we have a common understanding of what sex is based on millions or thousands of years of humans? Okay, so that's one of my arguments that you did say that I accurately repeated.
And that is a sort of understanding of what sex is based off of however long you want to attribute. Let's just say millions of years. Millions of years of experience. It has no sort of recourse to any sort of abstract objective standard.
Studies? Well, I'm sorry, wait. Millions of years of human experience isn't an abstract, unobjective standard. Do you have a study on what people 1 million years ago thought of sex? Can you go to like Three Kingdoms, China, and do a poll on that? You really think you're literally saying like, oh, everyone just knows this? That's what you're saying. You're just saying it in more words. That's the most abstract the standard can be.
I mean, I am thankful for you taking the time. At this point, I'm sort of feeling like we're getting into the land of the sort of water is not the same thing as aqua, which is not the same thing as H2O.
If were I the person you thought I was in the context of that debate, you would have won by now. And you know what? It isn't. They're two different words. With regards to like this
so
isn't.
Are you going to let me finish what I was going to say?
It's not. Are you just going to
react?
I want you to explain to me how millions of years of humans all believe this isn't an arbitrary standard.
I'm just going to jump in here. You ask a question, I'm going to make him answer it, but you have to let him answer it. So I'm going to let him go for a little bit, if I may. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's. I mean, first of all, this appeal to studies of people, however many millions of years ago, or even just thousands of years ago, is sort of beside the point. Like it distracts away from the substance of the conversation. Secondly, and it doesn't engage with the point that I'm trying to make. Secondly, it's totally routine, and everybody does it, including you. That in argument, we go to historical, practical experience of lived existence. That's just that's a reasonable and perfectly natural and common way that people go about having these sorts of discussions.
So and that's all I'm doing. There are anthropological.
So I'm not.
Papers.
So if you want to say that, human beings haven't understood sex, at least in terms of the very two basic and very general and broad functions of reproduction. And I'm not even just talking about consciously, because you're right. People aren't having sex consciously thinking, oh, I need to reproduce the human race. They have a natural drive for it. It's innate in the very thing that they are. And all living things have this. It's not just human beings that have this. You have rabbits who have this. Like every living thing has this innate subconscious drive that is just fundamental to their very core of their existence.
I think it's fair
to reproduce.
To talk about anthropological studies.
So just to say it's unconscious or fundamental doesn't mean that it's not there.
So to be Okay, to be clear, I'm not saying that humans haven't had sex and reproduced. You have said that your standard of what sex is supposed to be can be cited based on the, quote, general vibes of millions of humans throughout history. Like, there is a difference between just
That's a clever rhetorical way to rephrase what I said.
No, wait, no, it is.
That's not what I said.
You said vibes out loud.
No,
there is a difference.
I didn't say vibes.
I was joking when I said that. You are referring to vibes, though.
You're lying.
There is a difference between referring to anthropological studies that describe human behaviors in prehistory times and what you did, which is to go, humans have always known what sex is. That is what you did. That is a ridiculous and unfalsifiable. No, stop. That is a ridiculous and unfalsifiable standard, and you know it because when I pointed it out, you tried to get me on the Agua thing, and then you talked about how, I actually do the same thing because I'm familiar with anthropological studies and bring them up sometimes. These are incomparable. Humans have had... No. Okay. Humans have had sex for many reasons throughout history. Largely because they wanted to produce a child, because they wanted to bond intimately with somebody, or because they wanted to... have a lot of fun. I think that's probably the biggest one because that's the direction that our sex drive pulls us in. The sex drive doesn't make us want to reproduce necessarily. It makes us want to, because it feels good. That's why it feels good. It's an incentive structure biologically to get creatures to have sex with each other. So I think that's probably the overriding mechanism. It's certainly why I have sex. It does feel good. The idea that that this collaboratively can be referred to as some kind of ancestral human understanding of sex as a primarily reproductive and romantic thing is just not falsifiable and not true, because we have historical records on human society after writing was invented, and we know people were having tons of casual sex back then. So, if anything, the historical standard, to the extent that it exists, agrees with my position, which is that humans have always done this. Humans have always had oral and anal sex, specifically in large part because they don't produce children, because they're trying to avoid producing children, because they want to have fun without shackling themselves to an 18, well, back then it would have been 18, but to the burden of producing youth. And And I don't, and even if, by the way, even if you could like refer to all of human history as like a positive citation for like what something should be or what the moral right like position is, that's literally a fallacy. That's like argumentum ad populum, or whatever the fancy Latin term for that is. All of humans agreed for a long time on a ton of positions that were really dumb. Geocentrism, lightning being source of anger from the gods. That's not how we arrive at moral determinations for human behavior.
Yeah. So that specific logical fallacy.
And I really do want to get to my other question after this.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Bagel, go ahead. Yeah, then he'll. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Ask your question, Wick, because I don't want to derail you. This is your stream. Go for it.
It's no answer, please.
Okay.
I'm
Got it.
just letting you know. So
very briefly, I would
handle.
say that logical fallacy is only applicable insofar as has some sort of contrast to sort of instantiate it. If in fact human beings have retained this idea that sex is for reproduction, whether conscious or unconscious, subliminal or whatever, as a matter of just drive of existing at all, and commitment with another sort of individuated human being, then appealing to the history wouldn't be an instance of that logical fallacy.
And for fun, that's also a historical citation you could make. Maybe the reproduction and the bonding are actually the vestigial parts, and it's really supposed to be about
that's
fun.
correct. And so this is where you actually have to do a rigorous analysis of sex itself. Is it primarily for reproduction? Is it primarily for pleasure? Is it primarily for
we don't do this for any human social
unity?
Behavior. Literally nothing. Holding hands, kissing,
You
spending
do.
time together, hugging. No, we don't. We never say,
do. It's just a smaller scale.
By citing all of human history, we have determined that 51% of historical humans believe that hugging was a romantic gesture, so it's actually immoral to hug people casually. That's what you're saying, but for sex.
It's not, because I'm saying that citing human history is just one
you haven't
pretty
cited
significant
human history.
reason.
You cited like a vibe of human history.
No.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
Okay.
I've
No. Yes. No. Yes. No.
Anyway,
Yes.
go ahead.
Don't agree on this. I understand.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Bagel. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe this will carry the conversation forward. Maybe not. We will see. So you mentioned much earlier, that you believe anal sex to be immoral, right?
Yeah.
And I would assume you'd also include oral in that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And given that one of the reasons you would support legislation against contraception or to limit contraception or access to contraceptives is because you believe that casual sex is immoral on the ends that it takes away from the purpose of sex, would you also support legislation that would make anal sex and oral sex immoral?
Yeah,
there would be some punishment. Sorry, with the immoral thing, like illegal, legislation that would penalize people who engage in these activities.
No, this is difficult. I mean, there's certainly people in my neck of the woods, so to speak, who would advocate for that sort of thing. I have a really good friend who's spoken a lot of truth in my life, and he, there are periods of times where I was at my most ideological, and I definitely perhaps leaned or flirted with those sort of outcomes. But I don't think long term that is right. Regulating something as intimate as the marriage bed is not something the government should be in the business of doing. However, do I think that there shouldn't be sort of cultural standards and mores or unwritten sort of understood laws in terms of personal and public behavior? I absolutely do think that. But that's a much more complicated and bigger
I understand.
project.
But then the question becomes, right? If you are for legislating contraception, right, which does interfere with the marriage bed as well, what is the fundamental difference between legislating contraception and legislating anal sex?
Yeah, so the legislating contraception is something that people, like, contraception is a technology that people would not have on their own. It's something that they have to get from somebody else. While for whether or not you choose to do anal sex, whether or not you choose to do oral
I can't do
sex.
it by myself. I do need a partner.
Yes, but it's also between, ostensibly two people, or even if it's, you know, a group situation or whatever, it's between, you know, several people, but it's not at the scale of you couldn't do it without some sort of third or technology that you sort of use to sort of interrupt sort of the just natural power that you have. So that would be the main difference. There's just fundamentally different things. They are similar in terms of the moral analysis that one has, but they're not identical in all aspects.
Certainly. Simply, okay, question for Vaush now.
Also, I'm reflecting on how it's immoral for men and women to be roommates together as well, because male and female cohabitation would historically be known as like a sign of romance or mutual romantic commitment for like basically all human society.
Yeah, so I mean it depends. Like if again it's a matter of scale, right? So it's not for sure it's not the same thing.
Scale
but
compared to
like
the
for
harm
instance,
of casual sex, which is zero.
I've had female roommates in the past.
Well, hold on there,
or
bucko.
housemates.
Wait, hold on. The purpose of men and women living together is so that they can foster children unto God. You don't think it cheap? Oh, no. Your first time living with a woman outside of your mom was supposed to be with your wife.
That again, that's a sort of grotesque, you know,
parody
characterization
of cohabitation with a female. I completely agree. Yes, it's a disgusting parody.
Yeah, and it's not at all what I believe.
Well,
so
I don't care.
I'm not sure how it's relevant to me.
I'm not deferring to your belief here. It's morally wrong by my standard that I've learned in the course of this conversation. This is what I mean with inconsistency, by the way.
Well, no,
the funny thing is, opposition to male and female cohabitation is actually believed by a ton of religious people, both like Islamic people, whatever, and Catholics who really don't like men and women living together in non-like married situations. So what I'm doing right now isn't even this is your logic on mad. It's
it's a matter of scale. It's a matter of scale. It's a completely different topic.
But there's no harm you've demonstrated with casual sex, so there's no scale. It's a scale of 0 to 0.
No.
Also, how convenient for you, you know, matter of scale. You know, you get off easy, I'm sure.
No, what?
Oh, you're making moral excuses for a degenerate and devilish act. You should have had your first experience living with a woman when you were married.
No. So I would say it's probably not usually advisable, but it's not such a thing that one has to do
according to you, right? I'm sure
moral analysis. No,
right. Because you had a thigh job, and thigh jobs are also not as much of a scale as other forms of sex. I'm sure.
Again, people just sort of naturally applying their rational faculties.
Catholics literally refer to this as living in sin. Like this isn't just me making fun of your logic. This is believed by your institution.
I know. So, but what they're specifically referring to is not necessarily platonic housemates or something like that.
Right? So that's not what I've absolutely heard Catholics get mad at cohabitation, even in non-partnerships.
Yes, super traditional ones definitely do. You're right about that.
So how are you not perverting? Historically, would most human beings throughout history, overwhelming like 99%, not agree that a man and a woman who aren't related living together is absolutely something which is befitting that of a married couple, or at least two in a relationship?
First of all, I would say that's probably not true. I'd actually have to look it up, so I shouldn't speak with like 100% confidence. But if I had to bet, I would bet that a lot of the sort of moral standards when it comes to men and women cohabitating are sort of directly resulting from especially Puritan moral.
Oh, that's convenient. Okay, so when it's
I'd have to look that up to confirm it. But
so it's when something
in any case,
you've done, it's like, oh, that's like this out there thing, you know?
No. I'm saying it's a modern thing that the Puritans, especially because they're super strict in terms of sexual ethics.
What Puritans win? When would a Puritan have been born?
Oh, the Puritans were like 1500s to 1700s.
Oh no. In the 1950s in Italy, you really think that like men and women were just casually living together in the same house, non-romantically, and all their Catholic grandparents were like, oh yeah, oh that's totally fine.
Well, okay, so first of all, the 1950s is after the Puritans, right? So the Puritan moral framework would have already taken impact upon the world.
I would argue.
But secondly, Yes, I'm sure that happened, and I'm sure that there were varying responses. I'm sure there was people who were okay with it, and I'm sure there's people who were super not okay with it.
Well, interesting, because people feel the
That's
same
a
way about
discussion
casual
to have.
sex. I think what's interesting is that the
No,
acceptance of men and women
yeah,
living together as roommates is probably about as old broadly as widespread acceptance of contraception and casual sex. I guarantee you, back in the
no,
1950s,
because
no suburban
you
white
said
dad.
earlier that everybody's has been
One at a
having
time, one at a
casual
time,
sex.
one at a time,
No,
one at a
You
time.
said everybody throughout history has been having casual sex, and I actually agree with that. Like, I
yeah,
think
lots and
that's
lots of
true.
people. And no, but that's what's interesting. People have been having casual sex for all of human history. Men and women have not been cohabitating outside romantic circumstances for most of human history because housing space is expensive, and for most of
Yeah,
human history, people weren't wealthy
yeah.
enough to go frivolously getting roommates.
Well,
Roommates, that's like a new thing.
alternatively, because they were so poor, they just threw everybody together.
People tended
So,
to be in
so
single family households, but even when people lived in like tenements in like the 1900s and
yeah,
stuff, that was like a bunch of poor families packed together.
yeah.
That
But
was not a
again,
male and female
we're not
roommate
talking like you're talking about the
living in
1900s. That
sin.
wasn't that long ago. Like that was relative to the
Oh, really?
entirety
So
of
you're
world
saying
history.
recently there was a change in social standards that made it more commonly acceptable for people to engage in a behavior that was previously considered degenerate, and that there used to be a very strong social standard against men and women living together
Yeah,
in sin, but something happened recently that shifted social standards?
yeah. Again,
You're only
I'm
one
not
step away
I'm
from the
not
people who would
prepped.
have
I'm
you
not
burned.
prepped on this topic specifically. But
Okay. Okay. Speaking of
it's
not being
also
on
very
this
far
topic
away.
specifically, I do
Yeah.
have a question for Vaush now. And
Mhm.
then gang, then we'll kind of wrap this up afterwards, after Vaush and they go back and forth for a little bit. We'll wrap it up. We'll get to closing statements, but then stick around. They both agreed to accept call-ins, so I'll be bringing you in to ask questions. So if you have a question for Vaush, for Bagels here, or for me, feel free to call in and get in line. Exclamation point Discord. Click that link. Accept the rules. Jump backstage and get in line, and we'll try to get to you as we can. But for you, Vaush.
Mhm.
Okay. You have been in more than your fair share of social media drama with
Really?
high-profile women, including J.K. Rowling. Why are you here today advocating for an issue that ultimately doesn't affect you?
Well, first of all, I don't want to pretend that I'm selfless. It absolutely does. Okay, trust me. All right. I enjoy a lifestyle of casual sin, and I'm very, very happy to have birth control be accessible to the people I engage with. That's one. For two, worth pointing out that like even outside the obvious thing, where like the ability to engage in reproductive and contraceptive freedom has helped women a lot over the past 50 years. That's obvious. But additionally, I am one of my big like founding moral principles is consent, right? I mean, it's consent and harm. People should have the freedom to choose the directions that they want to move in life. And there are a lot of biological inequalities that are placed on us. Not just biological inequalities, but biological impositions. For example, some people are born sick or disabled. But should those who are born disabled not have the opportunity to live life as I can? Someone with, I don't know, 2 functioning legs and a not hurt spine? Sure, we develop medicine or prostheses to help them. And in a lot of ways, let's be real here, having a womb is a kind of natural unequal disability, or I should say a different ability. It does make life harder in some respects, between the period business, cramps, and also, you get casual sex, you get knocked up your whole life. That's kind of a burden, I think. But they also get to give birth to children, and I don't know, that's kind of cool, I guess, for some people who are into that sort of thing. I just want the playing field to be leveled for every human to have the most roads open to them at all times, as long as they're not hurting other people, which, that's important.
Okay, any response to that? Anything you'd like to say to this, Bagels? Otherwise, we'll, move on.
No, probably not. I don't necessarily see how a lot of
Well,
it
I
has
guess
to do with.
to rephrase the question for you specifically, then, because I'm curious as to your answer. You mentioned this in your opening statement that you are not a woman. This
Yeah,
ultimately does not affect you as much as it
yeah.
would a woman. So why are you here tonight, right? Advocating basically to limit access to contraceptions for women. What do you feel
Okay,
gives
yeah.
you this right?
Yeah, so yeah, again, I think I've sort of demonstrated throughout my argumentation, or I've tried to. I don't know how effective it's been, but in any case, the point is not that like what I have issue with is not the specific contraceptive technology per se. I do think that it has extremely relevant. It's a extremely particular case where we can sort of examine technology and how humans engage and interact with it more broadly. But that's not necessarily the point of this discussion either. More specifically, I think we have lost the understanding of teleology and also virtue as a result. And we need to sort of recapture those things. And that's going to have impacts on how we use technology, specifically contraceptives. And insofar as a human being, I have sort of a committed interest in maintaining those sort of standards. I think I have something to say. But as I mentioned in my first or my opening remarks, there's something about having some sort of existential intimacy or acquaintanceship with the technology itself that perhaps would give you a perspective that would more clearly see the moral issues that we've talked about in a way that I just simply cannot. And I would love and absolutely applaud to hear and listen and ask questions of educated women on both sides talk about what they think about contraceptives and why or why not it should be limited or banned or whatever else, or just allowed completely free. So, totally open. And so the reason I'm here ultimately is because my friend Eucharist recommended me to you. But I by no means am trying to speak from a place of authority. I'm just trying to express what makes the most sense to me and what I've been persuaded by.
Okay. And on that note, I would like to thank both of you, right, for engaging in this sometimes heady, but interesting, I hope, and fun debate. And I hope that the viewers enjoyed it as well. Once again, I want to reiterate that we have been sponsored by Rebellion Pack, and they have been gracious enough to pay me to host this. But no one here has been paid. No one here has been given lines or fed lines or anything like that. This is all real opinion, and it's important to talk about.
That's not true.
Again,
I have a team of Protestants that are feeding me everything I say.
fair enough. Maybe, perhaps. I cannot speak to that.
Disgusting.
I disavow if that is the case. Okay, I disavow. But I will say, we're going to give these wonderful gentlemen a closing statement and a chance to shield themselves, and then we are going to accept call-ins. So if you've been watching this and you've been molding and you've been like thinking, "Oh my goodness, I really want to, question these hooligans on their bad takes," now's your chance, gang. Hit that Discord invite, jump backstage, come on, and you can talk to them directly. And if you've been enjoying this content, please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're on Kick or Twitch, hit that follow button. That'd be nice. Super chats are always pleasant. Subs, bits, donos, all that helps. And thank you once again. We are going to go in the opposite order we started, and we will allow Vaush the first closing statement, and then we will go to Bagel. So Vaush, close us out.
Yeah, look, it's just, I think, reading between the lines, I find it difficult to assess this argument as anything but a religious opposition. At the end of the day, as a moral anti-realist, I recognize that where people's axioms come from, I don't necessarily know if I can critique them at their foundation, because I don't think there's like a solid grounding to do that for any one set of like axiomatic beliefs or properly basic beliefs. But in terms of how they're applied, I just think people have really strong emotional preconceptions of sex and what sex is meant to be that like corrupt their thinking on its potential social harm. I could imagine like after the Edo period, all the like samurai wandering Japan being like, oh, you failed your boss and you haven't disemboweled yourself. Well, if you look back 1,000 years of the history of our people in these mountains, you will recognize that failure and the seppuku are one and the same, and you've cheapened but it's always rooted in social conservatism. The idea that this is what it's supposed to be because this is what it's been, ****. Maybe it hasn't actually always been that. Maybe people have been fighting against that for the entire existence sense of humanity. Maybe people have always wanted to get a nut off without having to worry about having to raise a child afterwards. But let's talk practical effects, right? Not like in Hollywood, but in casual sex and contraception. Does casual sex, does contraception, does it cause social issues? Undeniably, yes. Fully agree with that. See, that's the problem with freedom, right? If you give people the freedom to make mistakes, they will. And there are people who cheapen the value of intimacy for themselves by engaging frequently in casual sex. Now, I would argue this is a skill issue. I don't think that having lots of casual sex innately does this. I just think that, like with any other experience, social, chemical, or otherwise, people are capable of abusing it or misusing it in ways that are detrimental to them. And I think that is an issue. And I think the best thing we can do that is focus on solutions to social alienation. Maybe people like casual sex, sure, but let them find love. Let them find people they care about for more than a Tinder swipe, you know? I think there are ways to address that. It has to do with the way we structure our economy. It has to do with poverty, the way we build our cities, the way we build our roads. But it's very multifaceted. But there is something that can be done. I don't want to be like ignorant of or pretend to be ignorant of the social problems that come about with freedom. There are things we can do. But I think the freedom is non-negotiable.
Okay. Thank you again for being here. Gang, it's Vaush. You should know where he is. Check him out. He's a great guy. I really appreciate him being here. Next up, Bagels. Go ahead. Close us out. Last word.
Awesome. Thanks. I really appreciate the time. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully, I communicated some of my arguments well. There's a lot more to be said, and I wish I had the time and ability to do so. I don't really stream or anything like that. I was just recommended by a friend of Wick to be on here, and so I'm really grateful. A couple essays or papers that I would recommend is Contraception and Chastity by Elizabeth Anscombe or Jem Anscombe, and the second would be Elizabeth Anscombe and an Argument Against Contraception by Anthony McCarthy. And if you look both of those up, if you're just interested in learning more about sort of the perspective that I was representing, that would be the place to go. Just to sort of summarize my position, I would just restate one of the most important ways we are able to arrive at moral judgments is through understanding what the object of our analysis is. In so doing, we consider what the ideal or perfect instantiation of the object would be, and then its function and how well or poorly it attains to that perfection. Those qualities which we identify as useful and effective at drawing a thing in unity with its perfection we identify as virtues or excellencies. We can apply such analysis to everything in reality, including sexuality. Thus we can come to understand what sex is both in particular actuality and abstract perfection. Then we can turn our minds to sussing out what constitutes what is good and bad with respect to sexuality. In so doing, we identify various qualities or virtues that serve as guideposts to our moral judgments about both particular and general cases. In the case of sexuality, one virtue of foremost importance is that of chastity. Just as courage is the foremost virtue of whose topic is danger or difficulty, so is chastity the foremost virtue of sexuality. We live in a culture, especially in the West, where considerations of teleology and thereby virtue is increasingly absent. We no longer have an understanding of what things are or are for, and thus cannot rationally explain why they are good or bad or what is good or bad about them. As a result, our discussions about all moral topics, including sexuality, and by extension, contraception, are impoverished. However, with a proper understanding of sexuality and willingness to follow where the virtue of chastity leads, I think we will find that contraception, insofar as it instills a culture of contraception and more broadly a culture of death, renders sexuality unintelligible, incoherent, and banal. Ultimately, this leads to broad societal harms as a detriment to human happiness. As such, I believe that our use of contraceptives should be reimagined and limited in important and practical ways. And I would last like to shout out a couple people. Eucharist, the boys over in the Piscord, the Crimsons, Gonda, Merles, Auntie, Galf, Gus, Palms, Mirror, all those guys. Love you guys, miss y'all. I've been blessed with a lot of great friends online and Discord, and I'm sort of new to this sort of space, so I'm really enjoying getting to know people. If you want to talk further, feel free to
Very well.
maybe reach out.
Yeah,
Okay.
gang. Check them out, gang. Again, If you've been watching this and you want in on this and you want to talk to us, get in line. There's already a line, so sooner you get in, more likely we'll get to you. We'll try to get to all the callers. Don't know if we will. No promises. Depend on how concise and everyone is. But as you have seen from today, conciseness is not one of our virtues. It is one of our vices. So we will start with the first person that I noticed enter. Here we go. Hello, you are live. Hello, you're muted on your end.
They've been silenced by the
Illuminati.
the reformists.
There he goes.
The Protestants.
Yeah, the Inquisition.
No, he's probably
bro.
trying to turn his camera on. I'll give him another chance.
The Spaniards.
Yeah.
They got him.
You're muted on your end. One more chance, buddy. We got a line. Otherwise, we're just gonna. Oh, hello.
Sorry, hello there.
Excellent. We can hear you now. What do you got for us?
So hopefully I'd like to ask Bengals a question. If you're in a partnership as a marriage and one of your partners has a STD or an STI, would you permit them to be able to wear any sort of form of contraception to make sure that they do not pass it on to each other, especially if it's something like a HIV case or something like that? Would it be good to wear contraception at that point?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So more broadly, I would say something that I try to say, we didn't really get into it a ton, but what I've tried to say is that we need to reimagine also just sex as well. It's one good among many. And this idea that we can have just profligate sort of liberal sex whenever we want it, absolutely whenever, I think is a concession to the vice of lust and lavishness. Or lasciviousness, I think is how you pronounce it. In any case, so people should probably be an important part of chastity, which is a virtue I mentioned as sort of the guiding virtue in sexuality, is such that you should only engage in sexual activity when it's sort of the right context and the right circumstances to do so. And again, just this is to turn sort of religious. The church has a long history of teaching sort of temperance or chastity to people, even married couples, in terms of having sex just willy-nilly. But secondly, and more specifically to answer your question, I would say yes, it would be a good thing to have for such usages. However, as far as I understand it, given certain STDs, and again, I don't have a very robust understanding of any of that stuff. But usually contraceptives are not effective as preventative measures in terms of giving it to somebody else. But that's just sort of my understanding. I don't know. Somebody who knows more than me would be able to tell you.
Anything else from you, friend?
Yeah, just a point of clarification then. So in the context that I put, as in being in a marriage, it would be a good thing for people to use contraception in that instance.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also, in addition to that, we would also want to sort of rethink how we think about sex in the same way that we have considerations for like gluttony and eating. In a similar way, we should also think about sex. It is one pleasure among many that is available to human beings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for being here. Any thoughts on this, Vaush? So you can have a word in here. Or
Yeah, I can eat when I want. I want to fuck when I want. Yeah.
noted.
If
Gotcha.
I
Okay, thank you again.
eat too much and I get a tummy ache, I can take Tums. Technology allows me to avert the consequences of my hedonistic decision making. So too, am I capable of using birth control? A pleasure not denied to me. There are many pleasures besides sex, Just for some reason, people keep trying to take one specific one away from me.
Fair enough.
Which is
Okay.
busting raw and pussy.
I suppose they call that Giga Chad. I don't know.
Okay, next up, Brianna. Hello, you're live.
Hey, Brianna. I hope I didn't come across as a lunatic.
Well,
Brianna,
I
wait.
just want to thank. First of all, can you all hear me? I'm on.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're on a different mic than you normally on. So
I am.
okay.
My apologies. 1 second. Let me switch over. It just popped over to AirPods. Let me. Wick, do you want to go to someone else, and I will switch over
I
mics, and you
will
can come
bring
back
in
to
the
me?
next person.
Hi, Brianna. Goodbye, Brianna.
We'll see her again soon. Don't worry. Hello. Oh, they're deafened. Undeaf. Okay, you have about 10 seconds. Okay,
It's always
good.
like this with the call-ins. It's just a part of
Okay.
life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know. I got kind of flung on here a bit suddenly.
Yeah, you're live. I'm gonna to those of you waiting in the backstage, be ready. I'm gonna pull you up willy nilly as I want. So, go ahead.
Right.
Ask your question.
All right. Well, this question goes out to Bagels. Now I've been trying to follow along with the debate as closely as I possibly could, but general gist that I get from the argument that you're making is that let me get just a moment. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Go to bed.
Basically, what I'm getting at with you is that you generally think that contraception should be limited sorry, God, I'm not.
Okay.
It's not
know,
easy,
okay,
is it, huh?
relax. Just deep
Sorry.
breaths.
Hey,
Deep breaths. It's okay.
Yeah, take a breath, take your time. I'm not anybody. None of these people are really anybody, so it's not a big deal. You're just chilling.
Yeah, my bad. Anyhow, basically, what I'm getting at with your argument is that you generally think that contraception should be limited due to the fact that it in some way interferes with like some natural or some natural like
Mhm.
process. Is that correct? That's
Kind of. I'm reticent to accept that wholesale, but yes, for the purposes of your question, yeah, I'm willing to accept it. Go ahead.
yeah. The issue that I take with that is that in terms of like what's natural and what's not natural, you can't really like tell what's good or what is good or what is bad based off what is natural or unnatural. Like me, for instance, I don't have my camera on, but I got like a pair of like thick frame Buddy Holly glasses sitting on top of my head because I can't really see all that well due to me biologically not being able to see well. I worded that like shit, but point stands. And but due to nature, I can't really see all that well. Thereby, I need something to help me see that well. Likewise, not everything that's natural is something that's necessarily good. A tornado is a natural occurrence, though I don't think you and I would necessarily agree that it's
I'm muting
good.
myself. I don't think I'm going to get to
Yep.
talk for a second.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for this nervous
Is there a
individual.
question here?
Yeah. Is that? I think the question I was asking is that with that, if we are in agreement with that, then what would make like what would make something like, I don't know, contraception some type of exception to the rule?
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, more or less what I'm getting at.
Totally. Yeah, it's a great question. And I would, again, just because, so I'm still on the way as well, so I'm still learning as well. But I would definitely refer you to that essay I mentioned from Elizabeth Anscombe, British philosopher, 1950s, called Contraception and Chastity, where she talks about that. But a common sort of misunderstanding, and it's not anybody who's trying to understand it, but the people who are expressing it. But a common misunderstanding of the arguments from natural law is that natural law is this thing, like objective standard or thing like that, that's sort of out there that we come to learn. It's more accurately depicted as sort of just the operation of right reason, as philosophers in that tradition have described it throughout centuries. So you're absolutely right that just because something is not natural doesn't make it immoral and sane. It just because something is natural doesn't make it moral. And that is not at all, I would say, what the natural law position or argument is.
Fair
It's
enough.
instead an evaluation of the thing itself.
I want to, Vaush, if you have any comments on this. Otherwise, thank you for your question.
No, only that, like, I agree. At the end of the day, we just have to determine what is good and what is not, based on the effects that it has, the consequences they have. You will always run into arbitrarity and skewed decision-making when you start to refer to, like, what things are supposed to be, because you're always going to be, like, pulling from some kind of higher order bias, you know? I don't think biases in ethical decision-making are necessarily wrong, because we all have them, but it's a matter of identifying them properly, and if they're inconsistently applied, you know, like 99% of stuff we factor in a utilitarian cause or whether or not it causes harm, but then for some stuff we have very strong religious objections to, we shift into this whole separate perspective on, you know, like our imagined historical totality of perspective, or like, you know, what's naturally meant. It's just a matter of consistency. You always have to be consistent on that, because if you can't be, people slip in the exceptions, like cohabilitation, whenever it's convenient for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Living
Thank
in
you for calling
sin.
Thank you for calling in, and I hope
I
you
go to
have a
confession.
wonderful-
I go to confession.
That's true, right? Catholic, you can shake all that off. I forgot.
That's right.
Okay, let's see if Brianna's
God
ready
is
for
love,
us
brother.
now.
God is
I
love.
hope she is.
And he loves you.
That's what. Oh
Just so
well,
you
I
know.
hope so. That's what I'll tell him when I have all of the casual
Hey
sex
man,
to
hey,
explain.
I'm praying and hoping dearly for you to be there in paradise.
Oh,
that
me
would
too.
be awesome.
I beat Pascal's wager by just praying to every god I know of. I
Well-
think this will work.
Well, there's one true God, and I'm definitely praying to him specifically for you, Vaush. I promise.
Much
Okay.
appreciated.
Oh, boy.
Wonderful.
Oh boy.
Okay. Bree, can you hear us?
I can. Apologies, I'm not on my normal mic. I'm traveling this week. I'm in Netroots Nation, but I got to tell you, I tuned into the whole thing. This was just a great debate. I wanted to put a fact check out there, and then Vaush, I have a question for you,
Uh-oh.
actually. So the fact check I want to put out there is, you know, Bagel, respectfully, you don't speak for all Catholics. The organization that I am working with, Americans for Contraception, if you look at who's actually spearheading this, it's a lot of Catholics that take theology very seriously and have come to a very different conclusion than you do, sir. So I just want to say you don't speak for all Catholics. There are people out there that are a lot more serious about policy than I think you've shown tonight, that are thinking about this and do take this seriously.
Only
Vaush,
real
my
Catholics.
question for you is, you tried to nail, that's right, Vaush, you tried to nail him down on specifics of the policy he is advocating. Wick tried for 2 hours to get him to live in reality instead of this Dungeons and Dragons nonsense. And what we're fundamentally talking about
Don't
here
talk bad about
is a
Dungeons and Dragons.
policy,
But go on.
is a policy, sure, where women are not going to have access to abortion because Roe versus Wade has been dissolved, the right to that, right?
Yes,
Women
well-
in his policy reality are not going to have access to birth control without access, like a note from a doctor, right?
Inshallah.
What do we do with people like this that like don't understand the pain that they're causing in women's lives, Vaush? I mean, do we try to reason with them? Do we just go, like, do we hand them a mic like we've done tonight and just
Do they
show
get the
people
wall?
what they believe and how poorly reasoned it is? Do we just outwork them at the poll? What is the answer here? Because this was maddening to listen to.
Well, I think in this case specifically, we have to nail a list of grievances to a church door and cause another schism, thus weakening their proportional power. I like the serious question, like, honestly, apart from to note, by the way, that Bagel, I've enjoyed the conversation very much and I appreciate you coming on, is that I don't think, I think that this is one of those unretractable advancements. I think that too many people benefit too much from contraception for there ever to be a social shift away from it. You know, it's so convenient for so many people. And I think for that reason, the interesting questions aren't about contraception itself, though certainly that's a front that has to be fought on, but what leads people to be interested in that, you know? I mean, I opened initially by talking about like the broader right agenda, barefoot and pregnant, like people being afraid of black women taking white, or black men taking white women, whatever. There's a lot that goes into it, but I think like those causes or the things that like supplement the anti-contraception stuff feed into so many other political issues that it's almost like a lightning rod in a way. So I think it has to be engaged with, and I think that it has to be study's not the right word, understood, if for no other reason than because it's indicative of so many other interesting things.
Does this answer your question?
Yeah,
Beautiful.
it does. And yeah, Vaush, I just want to thank you for coming tonight and arguing. It was a real pleasure to see you work, sir.
Oh, I was just here to see Bagel, of course. I wouldn't have showed up if I knew that he hadn't been here.
Unironically true. Brianna, thank you again. And I hope you have safe travels and a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.
Of course. Thank you.
Do you mind if I
Where's she traveling to anyway? Okay.
have a brief comment, since you given one to Vaush for my questions?
Yeah, have a brief comment, please. What
Yeah,
should
yeah,
we
yeah.
do with you? What should be done with Bagel?
Yeah. So I would distance myself from what Vaush is characterized as, that was it barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen or something like that. That's certainly not sort of the sort of Catholicism I represent. I also wouldn't say that I'm representative of Catholicism at all. I'm certainly not, and I hope nobody has gotten the impression that I am. Secondly, if you're going to characterize sort of the philosophical topics of sexuality, but then even how, practically speaking, it's applied in the discussion of contraception, I think you're probably fundamentally an unserious person. Although I do appreciate the work that I understand that she's done to put this discussion together, and I will pray that I will also meet her in paradise.
You know what? Wholesome. We'll go with it. Let's bring on the next contestant on this, whatever this is. They're deafened. Come on, undeafen. Pay attention. Okay, great. You're muted on your end.
There we go. Sorry about that. I'm watching on stream, so I was a little bit behind.
I know this guy.
No, you fucking don't. Shut up. Okay. So here's I've got two things. First of all, a brief comment. I'm a little bit perplexed as to why on earth Brianna Wu, who apparently is sponsoring the event, is putting up somebody who's not representative of Catholics. Kind of begs the question, what is the point of this whole conversation? But that being said, I have a bit of a tiebreaker.
No, to just let you know, Brianna did not pick Bagel. I chose Bagel so it's on me, if anything.
So. Oh, okay. Well,
I like Bagel.
On you.
I like Bagel too.
I like bagels. I'm kind of holistically invested.
Yeah. Okay. I saw on Twitter, which I'm not giving my Twitter, but I saw on Twitter that a lot of people were hating on my username. And look, I apologize. This is a nickname that I had since middle school.
What are you hiding?
On this note, can you address the Noah Sampson allegation?
Okay, yeah, that was another thing that I noticed. But first, the bagel thing. It's a nickname I've had since middle school. I use it as my like gamer tag for different things. So like, whatever, man. Like, I'm sorry, it sucks, but it is what it is. The Noah Sampson. I had no idea who that person is. I looked him up.
Well of you. That's why I invited you. Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate it then. No, I looked that person up. Apparently, he's sort of a leftist like YouTuber.
He's another
is what I understand. Oh, is he?
Yeah,
that's based.
Yeah,
that's based.
That's why he has beef with me.
We probably share a lot of similar points of view on things. I don't know. I haven't watched anything of his. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sunday. Sorry to interrupt. What's your question, buddy?
No. Well, it's a question to you, as a matter of fact, Wick. I propose a tiebreaker.
A tiebreaker?
Provided a tiebreaker, of course. Bagel has had Vaush on the back feet this entire conversation, but stalwart knight.
I don't know about that.
Love you too, President Sunday.
Yeah. Well, my proposal is very simple. In the event that your chat provides you with, let's say, a modest additional total of $50 in super chats, I propose that whoever manages to successfully draw an anatomical representation of female genitalia on Bagel's side, and a male horse genitalia on Vaush's side should be given the victory. In
This is unwinnable from his perspective. This is not. I've seen so much.
I like your
way.
confidence. I like your confidence, but I'm not so sure.
I'm already done.
Dude, I don't know.
Already done. I can't show it on stream, but I'm already done.
Counter proposal for the to put on the table. Because this is something people have paid a lot of money for me in the past, and then so I'm hoping that they will do again. Given that both parties consent, if we receive $50, perhaps we could have a tiebreaker in the form of a dance-off between these two gentlemen.
Oh, dude, you don't want that. I was a semi-professional dancer.
Whoa!
Back in
Hold
the
on.
day.
Wait. Go back to the
No.
horsecock thing. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a fair competition. But we can do. I definitely like the idea of maybe doing something to break the tie, so to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure it was a tie, but you know.
You
whatever.
all have my handles.
A very serious question before I go.
Yeah.
I did have one actually. So you mentioned Anscombe. My chat was very curious. What are your other influences? You mentioned Aristotle, Anscombe. Where are you getting like your readings of Kant and Aristotle from, etc.?
Ants?
Yeah. So I mean, so I'm studying philosophy in pursuit of a PhD, and my long-term goal is to teach. Just because I'm so thankful to all the teachers I've had in my life, it's such a profound gift. Really appreciate teachers. But in any case, I would say St. Thomas, that is Aquinas, and St. Augustine are also two huge influences. I mean, in terms of my readings of Kant, I am very critical of Kant, as you can imagine, with those other influences I mentioned. But I definitely appreciate him, and interestingly enough, he was also against contraception. But in any case, I'm
actually not aware of that. Where is that?
Yeah, so
where is he against contraception?
In the paper that I referenced earlier from Dr. McCarthy, Elizabeth Anscombe, an argument against contraception. Hey, let me see. Pull it up 1 second.
How about you give him the source?
Looks like he's correct. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Well,
the Metaphysics of Morals. The Metaphysics of Morals. He cites particularly the argument that is used in
crimes against nature. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Sunday, I will see you Tuesday after you have, through a shameful display, right?
Oh,
hey, the only reason
after watching what I did to Andrew Wilson, you don't want any of the smoke. I understand. I get it.
The only reason you lasted even 5 minutes against Andrew Wilson is because you took my advice because I coached you for it. Andrew Wilson lost to me, Wick.
Look, Andrew Wilson lost as soon as he couldn't tell the difference between a sit-in and a riot. Like, him being unable to differentiate the difference between those two things is wild to me. And yeah, he didn't even show up. So anyway, Sunday.
Wait, really? Oh my gosh. Well, really quickly to Sunday, since hopefully he's still watching. Two other contemporary influences that he should read if he hasn't is Alistair McIntyre and David Bentley Hart. But then also I really appreciate his username as a reference to Chesterton's great work, The Man Who Was Thursday, which I cried at the end of. Powerful work. Recommend it to anybody listening. Great book.
Gang, check it out. Temperate Takes, you're live.
I got time for let's say one or two more, but after that I gotta bounce.
I understand. So we'll do this one and then one more lucky contestant in the room of random chance. Go ahead, Tempest.
You can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of a weird perspective on this. So I noticed that everyone generally refers to the women who will be victimized by these kinds of policies, by not having access to contraception, by not having access to abortion. But I rarely hear them talk about the men who will be victimized by these policies. Because if women do not have access to contraception, if they don't have access to abortion, it's not going to be a majority, I will grant. But there are going to be a lot of women who are going to get a lot nastier with pushy men not having those protections to keep themselves from becoming pregnant, which means some dude's going to get hurt.
Well, I'm just totally self-interested. All I'm saying is, listen, okay, I've slept with dozens of women. could I have convinced dozens of women to sleep with me if they could have gotten pregnant from it like that? I don't know. I don't know, man. I feel like just purely self-interested. I feel like this is a numbers game, and contraception helps me out.
Okay.
Also, I don't want them to
while-
hit me, ideally.
While I have not slept with dozens of women,
It's okay. Most of them were not even that good.
I think this is a great question insofar as I would also be against contraception with respect to men. So like I said, my position is an equal opportunity position. The way I think about it again is in relation to the answer that I gave to the second question, I think it was, or maybe it was the first. Either way, people should reevaluate what they understand sex to be. Insofar as people are just having sex willy-nilly, I don't see how it's on a sort of serious and self assessing serious moral analysis, how just profligate sex is sort of any better than just eating McDonald's every single day. There's a right sort of reason that is associated with sex that is intimately connected with its purposes. And so being able to control one's desires, control one's drives on a physical level, I think is fundamentally a good thing, and it contributes to both personal happiness as well as the common good.
So, curiosity, do you accept that there are sexual predators out there who will take advantage of pretty much anybody and force anybody to get sex?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a tragic, horrific thing. And I've shed tears over friends who have experienced those sorts of things. So it's absolutely serious, and it's absolutely horrific. But some sort of a bad doesn't justify a further bad. And so that would be sort of my position.
Okay, that was all I had, Wick.
Okay. Give someone DM me and I answered, so put me on the thing. Okay, one last person. Oh. Who? You're live. Go ahead.
How's it going? Vaush, I was just wondering, I've waited a really long time for this. And I was just wondering if you could tell the people what made you decide to lie and with intent deceive and defraud your audience, calling me a pedophile when you knew that to not be true. And what's kept you from retracting that when all the evidence and everything come out, and you've ignored me, you haven't responded to my emails. You cost me a lot. Your audience has doxed and harassed me. The compounding negativity that you've caused me.
Wait, is this Extreme Dad?
It sure is, buddy.
Okay.
Do you realize that people still harass me about that today?
No, that's the idea of this being anything other than self-directed is unfathomable to me, because I don't see.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Nobody.
Yes, this is about me.
Yeah, I know that. So nobody in my community that I see, at least, like engagement-wise, I don't see people talking about you. Normally, when there's like community harassment that's ongoing, it's kind of like kept, like a flame is kept kind of smoldering by some sort of persistent engagement. I haven't seen that happen, which makes me wonder what the fuck is going on with you. Listen, Extreme Dad, I don't remember anything about our engagement.
Well, let me refresh your mememory. You said
perhaps it might.
I just want to make.
Perhaps it might be most effective to just briefly apologize and then.
Wait, I don't know. Apologize. What? Sure. I don't even know what the stakes are.
Saying you said that I was in your server, that you caught me preying on minors in your community. You
I don't
said
manage my Discord server. I think I remember
your Reddit account, Irish Laddie, said that I got caught preying on children.
Sir, you have to let him respond. You've made an allegation. Vaush, go ahead.
No, I don't even know. I think I remember like 3 years ago, Extreme Dad was somebody who was on my stream once or twice. And then some years ago, somebody was like, oh, he was being creepy to a minor in Discord, so we removed him. And then later someone was like, oh, what happened to Extreme Dad? And I was like, oh, that happened to Extreme Dad. I don't directly manage Discord server moderation because I'm a very busy guy.
No, but you
playing 12
directly
hours of
manage the
Pikmin.
words that come out of your mouth.
Okay.
And you went on stream and you said to your audience that you had caught me preying on minors.
Okay, I don't remember
And that
the
was not
exact
true, was it?
words.
That was not true, was it?
How would I just
Was that
repeated
true
what
or
my
not?
Discord.
Was it true or not? Did
Okay,
you catch
okay,
me
stop,
preying on minors?
stop.
So I
stop.
would submit his behavior here as evidence towards insanity.
Did you or
which
did you
further
not catch me
exonerates
preying on minors, Vaush?
Catch you?
Was there any?
You gotta
like
let him
Hanson?
respond, buddy. I muted you till he does.
Oh no, okay. Look, if this is literally like me repeating something a Discord mod, I don't even know which Discord mod, but like generally speaking, I think that my Discord mods do a good job of assessing. People complain about them, of course, but complain about everyone, of assessing whether or not somebody's like engaging in bad behavior. However, the idea that like you being removed from a Discord server and flippantly mentioned by me has led to 3 years of harassment towards you is, I'm just going to say it without any knowledge at all, insane. So whatever happens, this is self-directed. Whatever is happening here, this is like you've carried this with you, okay? But you know what? I don't care, because I was just repeating something a Discord mod said 3 years ago. So sure, I exonerate you. To my knowledge, you're not a pedophile. You've never been a pedophile. You are an upstanding human in every respect. And I don't care, and I wish you the best of luck. You're not getting back in the Discord server, though. I
Last
don't.
word, then we're gonna let you go. Nobody.
I don't
All right. That's
remember enough to engage.
And do you apologize for any negativity or pain that you caused me?
Well, okay. Some of the negativity was because I remember those debates with you, and I think we have some pretty strong political disagreements. So I think at least some of the negativity had to have been warranted based on direct engagements with you.
Yeah. Okay. But some of it was probably the result of saying that I was preying on minors in your community, I would imagine.
Well,
right. That would probably cause a little bit of negativity to be sent my way, right?
Well, I mean, I guess if I'm officially...
And that wasn't true. So
right,
I'm just saying, can you apologize for saying it?
Take your word for it. You know what? I'm sorry for all the harm that I've caused you. I don't know.
So
I don't know if
that.
I have, and I certainly don't think it was knowing, but I hope that you do well, and I wish you the best of luck, okay? And I wish you no ill will
Have a
moving
great
forward.
day. Apologies.
No, that's fine. That took me a sec. I was like flashing back there. I was like running through those like mental Rolodexes to try to find out what was going on there. I hope he turns out okay. You know, even with the people I have strong disagreements with or whatever, I don't like revel in the thought of anyone being unhappy. Even people I have strong disagreements with, I hope that unhappiness is a catalyst to help them with self-improvement. But in that case, that seems like it's a wacky case.
Okay, gang. Maybe not the one we wanted to end on, but this is, again, we have to go. We have things to do. And gang, what do we got coming up? So Monday, I'll be having a debate between Omar and probably Beckett, but that's still up in the air, about whether Saddam Hussein was a good guy. Tuesday, I will be debating with President Sunday as to the efficacy of political violence. And yeah, that's what we got on the docket so far. Tune in, gang. Tune in. But for now, I bid thee all.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on. Bagel, thank you very much for the conversation. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Same to you both. I really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Beep. Was that the right time to hit that button? I think it was. That was an interesting conversation. Fuck. Oh man, the problem is on a purely interpersonal level, I like Bagel and I enjoyed talking with him, but like, it's all religious motivation. Yeah, like 100%. The idea of like determining the morality of behavior based on whether or not it conforms to an imagined pre-existing standard of whether or not humans understand it to be that, like, this is nobody. Not only does nobody not use that system for stuff in reality, nobody could. It's not like a sustainable system, you know. This is like one of the genres of debate that I'm always the most cautious about, I guess, or the ones that like always make me feel the weirdest, where like a lot of religious people have a ton of beliefs that are just like a big poop of religious thinking, like this. You know what I mean? This is what I was drawing when you couldn't see his camera, right? And then like this guy Bagel is smart and he goes and gets a PhD in philosophy or whatever, and now it's like this. It's like a poop that's been fortified. You know what I mean? Like, I don't doubt the quality of the fortifications. I don't doubt like the time and energy and effort and intelligence in the architectural, you know, but the fundament, right? You know what I mean? You can be a super smart and like cool person, but still have like really Extreme Dad's Twitter description is literally Vaush hurt me. Oh. Okay, look, for real, I don't want any harassment directed against the guy. I don't even know. I can't, I'm not investing myself in this. But I hope he hurts no more. Funny rhetorician, if I read that out loud, it's all going to start again. Anyway, to be clear, I don't think the bagel... People were saying the bagel was dumb. You can say people are dumb without actually thinking they're dumb. I don't think he was dumb, like, at all. I think he's a really smart guy. I just think that people... Like, humans are self-justification machines. We are built and we are designed to take things we care about and then use our faculties of reason to explain why we care about them and why it's right for us to care about them. And religious... like religious moral presuppositions are really common and they're very strongly held. And if Bagel's a really smart guy and he has an interest in philosophy, then he's going to try and justify them with the tools that he has. An admirable process. I just wish, you know. He also had a sense of humor, unlike a lot of your opponents. No, I think he's a cool guy, like unironically. I would enjoy just like based on the interaction, like hanging out with him. In the waiting chat, Extreme Dad was just complaining about how you ruined him. I hope he lives freely. I hope he spreads his wings and flies like a bird. He was pretty cool. Yep, Vaush. I think that chat was way too harsh. Well, I do think the consequences of his political beliefs are unjustifiable and kind of monstrous. I also don't think he's malicious. I'm saying it. I could be wrong, but I'm calling it. I think that he is authentically, in his mind, I mean, like he's authentically justifying what I would call unjustifiable religious moral biases through philosophy, and he's not doing this deliberately in a scheme to like advance a reactionary agenda of like female subservience. You know what I mean? That's my opinion. I think he's a cool guy. Gotcha, Flavier. Well, yes, whatever. Maybe Vermin. It could just be because he had the mustache and long hair, and I just like that. I can't read that out loud, Tequila Sunset, or he's going to get upset with me again. But he can... Extreme Dad is now the strongest person in the Vaush extended universe because I can't criticize him without starting another vengeance arc, and I have to, like, you know, like, I have to... He's the guy I got to be watching out behind my shoulder, you know? Yeah, maybe John S. I don't know. I know people can kind of twist themselves into donuts with this stuff. Look, we are over time. I'm going to read these donations and then I'm going to skedaddle, okay? I'm going to hit the add button. I love you guys very much. Tomorrow is Saturday, so I might or might not stream. We'll see. Saturday is when I have my yes, literally, Vermin. Saturday is normally when I have my D&D game, so that's normally the day that I take off. Also, to be fair, I've been streaming a lot lately, right? Now that my cough is better, I really miss streaming. We've been doing lots of stuff. We've been doing more stuff, and we have a lot of debates to do as well. So, like, yeah. Thanks, Tempest. So let me hit the... as soon as I mention it, I cough because it's psychosomatic. Let me hit the add button. I'll read these donos. Okay.